Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the North Shore Fire Commissioners meeting. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Amy, if you wanted to start with roll call.
Yes, good evening, Commissioner Admin.
Here.
Commissioner Pratt,
Present.
Commissioner Byers,
Present.
Commissioner Webster,
Here.
Commissioner Wolem,
Here.
Chief Cowan,
Here.
Legal Counsel Matt Paxton,
Here.
and I'm Board Secretary Amy Oakley.
Do we have any public comments? Mr. Marin?
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Is this public comment for budget, or is the chief going to make his presentation and then the budget comment will be made? I'm not sure how you want to do this on the public hearing.
We don't have two separate public.
Well,
There is on the agenda, there's two separate public comments.
Oh, there is. Okay.
So I just would prefer to wait until the budget's open public hearing on the budget.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
that's 4.5 on the.
Any other public comment from anybody online, Amy? I don't have my glasses on. I can't see very well. Okay, we're gonna move on to approval of the meeting agenda.
I make a motion, we accept the agenda as presented.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, motion passes unanimously. Chief, if you want to go ahead and start the open public hearing.
I think you're supposed to. Well, I think you're supposed to formally open the public hearing.
And how would I do that?
We just announced we're opening the public hearing.
We are now opening the public hearing
Or but then you read the.
for the budget benefit charge and other revenue sources.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
all right, thank you, sorry about that.
All good.
Can you bring up the, I'm gonna walk through some high level summary of what 2024 looks like. And then open it up for any questions about the expense budget, and I believe that there will be some ample discussion that we need to have about the capital budget. You'll have printouts here, it looks like momentarily. So I continue to work on and refining over this last week and even over the weekend, updating numbers as they were coming in from the county, you know, with some of the new numbers that we got from there on fund balances and so forth. And that's why there's, you know, fresh off the presses, some new numbers. This is reflecting the most up-to-date information. This is what I'm proposing to you all. So starting off, we are planning on adding 12 firefighters this next year. And adding the firefighter EMT to the MIH team, which some of you may refer to it as the CMT, but the mobile integrated health team. That'll give us 2 teams working Monday through Friday. On the ALS side, we have 6 candidates in the paramedic training. They'll be out sometime in August. We don't know what we'll be adding into 2025. That'll depend on some of the attrition and so forth that we're looking at. And administratively, we're adding an additional administrative position primarily for HR duties. And we're actually adding some funds for a part-time or contract potentially social media coordinator and or data analyst. These are some areas of weakness that we have in being able to report out on certain things. Excuse me, especially as it comes to WSRB ratings and performance measures. And then also we're preparing for the potential support services, an additional support services role. We don't know what rank that will be, but either a captain, battalion chief, or division chief, more than likely. Any questions on staffing for the different divisions? Okay.
doing those positions, are they contingent on whether or not that
Thank you, Chief.
goes to it? We had the extra battalion chief.
No, none of these are contingent on that, but that's a great question. Thank you. That these positions are actually in addition to, and there isn't for her for now. And then if we don't extend that BC position beyond next year, then we'd have to reevaluate what that would look like. It may or may not, mean, something else happening. This is basically just to address the situation where we're just overloaded, workload wise.
Mhm.
And there's multiple different areas and positions that we're looking at trying to support.
So is this a percentage that would be going to North Shore and a percentage to Shoreline?
Correct.
This is not a, okay, because there's parts of this that I think that Shoreline would have more need for than what North Shore would need. And because, you know, percentage wise and so, yeah, I definitely need a breakout of how that would work, how that'd be shared and how it's put in.
Well, it's based off of the percentages that we presented in the budget. The overall Shoreline budget,
Mhm.
and that's based off of the agreed to percentages per different types of positions. So administrative position, you know, is, you know, so most of these are administrative. Well, the firefighters would be operational. That would be the operational percentage. I believe I have. I want to say it's 38.3. Operational is 38.83%. Administrative is 29.63%. Operation, or I'm sorry, fleet is 38.1%, and facilities is 33.3%.
Chief, Kelly, could you briefly touch on the importance of that WSRB rating and the role that these potential administrative support services play in improving that or maintaining it? So you just got a new rating of 2, right? There's only one organization in the whole state that has a 1, which is the best.
Yeah,
Shoreline's at 2, right? One of the few organizations in the state.
yeah, we're in the top 3%, I believe. 2 point something percent, I believe, of the state. And the data, the gaps in data analysis and reporting have been, we've known about, it's been an issue for, and becoming more of an issue for all departments, not just ours. And then and it becomes pretty glaring when we're trying to report out for WSRB, but we also have GMT audits. We also have
But they're just kind of big picture. What is the WSRB and why is it important that we maintain as high a rating as possible?
So WSRB stands for Washington State Rating Bureau. It's an analysis that the insurance companies pay for. It's an evaluation of all fire departments that happens every few years. And where it really becomes important is, especially if you're a commercial property owner, it has a direct impact on the insurance rates that you pay. It can even have an impact on single family residents, homeowners. But that part, it just depends on the carrier as to whether or not they value. And sometimes there's a rate break or savings in one level to another, but maybe not in the next level down, kind of thing. So it's kind of hit and miss. But basically, the WSRB gives you an overall rating of how your department is doing, you know, from a risk analysis. And they do an analysis of all sorts of different things, whether it's training and operations and staffing and fleet, water systems, dispatch. It's all encompassing. I can provide the report if you'd like.
No, I'm just curious, like for the public, it's a rating that the insurance companies provide to other insurance companies as to the quality of the fire service that's being provided. Correct.
That's much better. It's much better than the way I think.
The only organization in the state that has a 1 ranking, which is the best, is Seattle.
And it just dropped earlier this year.
Right, and Shoreline has a 2. Most other local jurisdictions are 3 or 4. Right,
or higher.
Right, so the quality of the fire service that Shoreline provides is like top 3%, put it out, and that is reflected in the insurance costs that our commercial properties are charged, right?
And potentially homeowners, but yes.
Okay.
Especially the commercial property owners.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and I have one more question here. We have the 6 candidates for the paramedic training program,
Mhm.
and that's not part of Medic 1. That's
No, that is Medic 1,
so
which is a completely separate budget
right.
than the suppression budget. I call it the suppression budget. It's basically the general budget. These, I have to keep them completely separate out. There's only one piece that comes over, and that's the ALS overhead. that that we get a little bit of revenue for to help administer the ALS program.
So we get, North Shore gets, money for Medic One, and we pass that through to Shoreline for that part of it. Is that correct? That should show in our budget that. Should
Not-
be a pass.
That's not entirely correct. So the EMS levy has different pots of money. And then I'll talk about the three major pots of money. The first is the ALS funds, which North Shore does not get a check for. Only ALS providers get that money, and it's on a per unit allocation. So Shoreline, the Shoreline ALS program gets the money allocated to help provide services to the North Shore Fire Department area. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
And okay, so that's the ALS side. Then there's a BLS side. And then every fire department gets some money, to help augment their BLS services that they provide. Because we all provide BLS services. The EMS levy helps pay for some of that service. It's not all, it's not anywhere near. And that comes off of the obligation. That money is still a check that Shoreline receives, but it comes off of the obligation that the North Shore Fire Department has to pay contractually to Shoreline for the ILA. Which it was for 2024 is $534,890. And then the third, and there's other little pots, but the other third pot of money, which is an that back in the day, it was Shoreline, North Shore, Bothell, and Woodinville pay. They contribute MIH dollars to help support the MIH program. It doesn't fully fund it. It's to help pay for part of it. And so with East Side is now covering Woodinville, so Woodinville dropped off. So we don't get any of those MIH dollars, but we do get the money from that. It's an allocation for North Shore and Bothell, and I also charge Snow 10. Snohomish County Fire District 10 for the portion of Bothell that isn't covered by those King County dollars as well. So it helps augment. It doesn't pay for the whole thing. I'm hoping with the new EMS levy and the emphasis on the MIH programs around the whole county, that in 2025 and beyond, that it will be fully funded by the EMS levy, but at this time it's not. And that's also a separate, a separated budget within the Shoreline budget.
So we want to augment the MIH program. We're trying to build two teams. And so there's split in that percentage wise between Shoreline
and North Shore.
North Shore. Well, is Bothell still part of that?
So Bothell is still paying for that.
So does that show us in the budget? Because I couldn't find that in the budget.
It's not in the North Shore budget, it's in the Shoreline budget.
Okay.
Under
But
the
it shows that
MIH
we're
tab.
dealing with it here. That's, I'm just I'm having struggle finding that in our budget, how we.
There is a line item in the North Shore budget to help augment the MIH program. It's a line item at the bottom of the BOC budget. I can show it to you when we get to that. It's about 100, I want to say 112,000, 116, something like that. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I just got to see how it pencils out. So, okay, I won't interrupt again.
Okay. On the funds, on the reserve funds, because I was trying to consolidate the different funds and try and maximize our potential. I have in the budget that I'm proposing, it is to lump some of the reserve funds together. There is a resolution that identifies the different funds, which I believe I sent out to you all. So we would have to look at whether or not we were going to change the resolution, which we could do in a couple of weeks if you guys agree with what I'm proposing. If not, then we would keep them separated out, for the resolution on the different budget amounts, such as you have money set aside for natural disasters, insurance, unplanned revenues, etc. So in this case, what the reserve funds that I'm identifying here is that we need to maintain at least 5% of the reserve funds needed to fund the Shoreline Fire Department. This is the commitment that we had under the ILA. This is actually less than what you have got reserved right now. Again, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible, and I'm pulling some of the money off, to to make it, at the minimum level that's necessary and it's at 5% of the shoreline expenses. And the other 10% is being covered by shoreline to maintain a total between the two departments, a 15% reserve fund. That makes sense?
So I have some questions on the reserve funds.
Mhm.
So we do have the resolution that you sent us all a copy of the current resolution from 2020 for the North Shore Reserve Funds.
Right.
And so how it sounds like what you're potentially proposing moving forward is to not have it be broken out like it is currently per that resolution. Do you have a sense of like where we are right now relative to the current way that we've established that we want to have these reserve funds? How are
Yes,
you're talking about taking some additional out of those reserves for some capital expenses. I just want to know, where do we sit right now in those reserve funds compared to the resolution?
Well, I have an actual printout as of today for what the different funds are. Let me back up and say the reserve funds are lumped together from the county standpoint. But by resolution, we have identified and separated the insurance, natural disaster, et cetera. What I'm proposing is that's making it more complicated, and I don't believe that some of those are as necessary as they may have been in the past because of the ILA with shoreline. And so I would propose that we lump it together a bit more and make sure that we still have enough funds to make everybody feel comfortable about what we have in reserve, but not necessarily break it out and in my opinion, be inefficient with how we're setting aside that money.
The thing that our reserve funds did before is that we have control for each one of those items. That's why we kept it broke out. And also, we get the interest off. So, North Shore gets interest. So we're if we start transferring funds out in a lump sum, we can lose that. And
we can keep the reserves up. I'm trying to keep the equivalent levy rate down as far as possible.
right.
So, and we're gonna have a discussion about the funds and all that. If you want to keep those up, that's entirely a board decision, and that's fine. Just understand that translates into either not spending money on things that that we're proposing or need, or it's going to be a higher equivalent levy rate,
right,
to balance the budget.
Same thing with
I was trying to minimize I was trying to keep the equivalent levy rate down as far as I could, and still feel comfortable with the reserves that I've identified. And we'll be talking about the fund balances here in just a little bit.
Okay.
So, the carryover, we do have quite a bit of money in our carryover, the general expense fund. Again, I'm trying to set minimum levels of comfort, and for me, that's 25% plus $700,000 of extra, which is what I do in the shoreline budget as well. The general benefits fund is to cover the left one liabilities and the early cash out retirements, which is it's $94,009, and it's linear for the next 4 years. That was one number that I needed that I didn't have last week that Don confirmed with me, for the early retirements that before the ILA.
Okay, so we transferred what, 2 million last year, and when we did this for dealing with those funds. So
no, you didn't.
then what does that money? Where did that
left
move?
one liabilities maybe?
There's left one liabilities, and then there was early retirements pre-ILA
Right.
that you offered to some people. I know Mike Morse was one of them. There's
Yeah.
a handful of others. I don't know the
We
names.
paid that. We set
And
money
that's
aside.
a commitment over the next for 5 years. So you have another 4 years,
Right.
at 94,000. I have Dawn is on here too. If there's specific questions that maybe she can answer.
Because we did put money aside, transferred money over for the left one.
You did not transfer money over to Shoreline for either of these expenses.
Right.
These were expenses that North Shore wanted to maintain. If you wanted to maintain those reserves.
Yeah, so that's true. I remember that. Okay,
Okay.
so it's 94,000.
We will get to this.
Thank you.
Okay. The general capital fund, it had started off at 600,000. I believe there should be at least 900,000. It is way underfunded. Way underfunded. And there's, and we're gonna get to the capital fund. I think that's gonna spark most of the conversation tonight. Of things that have been delayed and not been addressed, and now we're reaping the benefits. On the budget side, the assessed valuations roughly for the Lake Forest Park Kenmore area is going down by 9.4%, which is one of the indicators or one of the factors that is pushing up the equivalent levy rate as well. Shoreline's going down by 8.3, I think, is what it is. Expenses, the overall expenses increased by about 8.65%. Not including the ALS and MH. This gets back to what I was talking about before. Those are separated budgets. Increases are primarily due to additional staffing, CPI of 4.6%, and the high inflationary costs of goods and services right now, and delays in supply chains. Although, funny thing, I was listening to NPR. Supply chain is not supposed to be an issue, but we are seeing delays that are just ridiculously long. So I don't know if I believe that entirely. So on the revenue side, we're looking to continue with efficiencies and trying to improve things. What I've got in this proposal is an equivalent rate of $1.25, which is a significant increase from where we're at. And then on the budget, we're currently anticipating tax levy revenue at 59,08,457. That is what is allowed at the 1%. We are maximizing what we can do with the 1%. And we're going to need to talk about what this means overall, because the fire benefit charge now is pushing close to the 60% threshold, which means, and I shared with you my concerns about if you cannot go over the 60% threshold. So when I'm proposing it sometime in 2024, we look at something in front of our taxpayers. Any questions on this? Because I'm going to skip to some of the other things that we've already been talking about. Okay, why don't we go to the next tab? The summary tab. It summarizes some of the out of the expense fund and the capital budget and some of the revenues that are identified there. And the equivalent levy, if you scroll down just a little bit more. $1.37 including the capital bond, $1.25 without the bond. And the bond has 4 more years, I believe. I think Don was telling me 2020, I want to say 2027 or 2028. So we're getting close. On the fund balances, the next tab. This gets to what I was just describing. So the general expense fund, these are estimates because we're still working through this year and all that, but I'm estimating that we'll have about 5.6 million at the end of this year in our general expense fund. If you look at 25% plus the 700,000, we have extra funds in our general expense fund. And why don't I walk through all these, and then I'm going to talk about what I'm proposing as far as transfers.
Chief, I'm sorry, that 25% is just the North Shore budget. It's 5% of the total shoreline budget. Is that correct?
The 25, yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So because the 5% is down here, and then the next one. Unplanned loss of revenue. Again, this is what it's being called. Again, started at about 2.95 million. There's no expenses out of there, so that's what it's being planned at. I believe that you could probably pull some money out of there as well. 5% of the shoreline expense budget is 1.8 million. So again, there's potentially some extra funds there if we wanted to lean down some. And then if we scroll down, and then I'm going to have to scroll back up, but I'm going to scroll down first. And then it's on the expense. Sorry,
Well, I don't want to get into too much of the weeds at all, but I was just noticing. So you have so it says unplanned loss of revenue reserve fund there. Is
that's yes,
that's according to this. So I guess what I'm wondering is, it seems like some of the things that are called out in the resolution may be present in this budget, just in different categories. The money may not be in a reserve in just a different category.
in different buckets.
Yeah.
And that's, and again, I've lumped the reserve as there's different funds here.
Mhm.
I look at the unplanned revenue reserve, that's just the rain, I look at that as a rainy day fund, it's like if all of a sudden revenues dried up, if AV dropped, if expenses went way up or something like that, and we couldn't adjust fast enough, that would help us cover some of the debts. And so whether there's different, buckets of money within that reserve, that's up for the resolution, that's up for your decision as to how it gets, what that level of fund is. And if you want to keep buckets separated out and so forth. Again, I'm trying to simplify it a bit, and trying to get some where I believe that there is some extra funds, but it all gets down to the comfort level that you all have and where these funds sit, whether it's a reserve fund or down here where these expense funds sit. I'm trying to give you my best, what I believe is our best approach. But this is a decision that you all need to make. The reserve funds and everything are fully under your control. So on the expense fund side, the employee benefits, I mentioned this, we have the left one liabilities and then the employee retirement payouts at $94,009. That'll be linear again over the next 4 years. On the capital replacement, there's on the capital side, there's apparatus, hose, and other, vehicles, hose, and other that's in it currently. I was lumping it together into apparatus and equipment, but this is obviously where our biggest expenses are over, well, in 2024 and the next few years. There's going to be some pretty expensive or pretty high levels of funds that are going to need to be expended on some of the capital projects. The start off at 600,000. It's in the negative for some of the purchases that we've already made this year. This budget reflects the purchase of the rescue in 2024, which is a choice that needs to be made whether or not we're going to pay for it in 2024 or defer it for it's going to take 3 years to build it. Or we defer it for 3 years and then pay for it at that point. And we'll talk about that when we get to the capital fund portion. But there's some pros and cons to that. And so that's why on column H there, next to the apparatus, you'll see a very big number of $2.2 million. Below that's the equipment capital replacement fund, and then below that is facilities at 300,000. Questions about this so far? And you can scroll back up to the top. What I'm proposing, because I believe that there's some extra funds in these reserve funds, and again, my intent with all of this is to try and get the equivalent levy rate down, is to pull some of the funding off, some of the what I believe, some of the surplus funding off our general expense and reserves to the tune of 1.7 million out of the general fund and a little over $1 million out of the reserve. Maybe scroll down. We also need to transfer in about 210,000 into the employee benefits fund, and then you'll see the different numbers down below there for the apparatus, equipment, and station. All of these populate from the capital fund page, or the capital budget tab and page. So as we adjust those things there, if we decide to fund, not fund, defer, whatever, that will have an impact on these numbers as well. Okay. Go to the BOC expense. This is the expense fund, and there's not a lot to this. We did increase some of the line items in discussions with you all, for like conferences, and there was a pretty significant increase in the commissioner day of work compensation. I added, there's quite a bit of money that we need to spend potentially on elections this next year. It's over $200,000. So we can go through any of the questions. I don't know if you've got any questions about the expense funds.
I have just apparatus under capital requirements. Rescue. you know,
This, we'll get to the capital budget here in just
Okay.
a second. Is there any questions about the expense fund
Just for the,
or expense budget, I should say?
just for the board of commissioners. Or are you talking about the whole overall everything? Okay.
This portion of
Yeah.
the budget. Okay. Why don't we go to the capital then? That's where I figured we were going to be spending most of the time that next time. We just run these. Okay, so,
It looks like the turnout is cut off with not full capital on.
yeah, needed the bigger paper.
sorry.
It might be on the back side if you look.
Well, you guys, you can look, I can turn it out there. If you guys want to share.
Oh, it's on another page.
Oh, it's on the next page,
Yeah.
the notes.
Notes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so,
it's still.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's only showing apparatus and electronics. It doesn't even have any facility stuff on what was
is
printed.
it on the back? Back.
No, it's not.
Okay, sorry, well, why don't we just, we can walk through it on the screen here. Or you guys can look this. Not copy that. The big question is the rescue. It's a $2 million purchase. We can save 5%, $100,000 roughly, $100,000 if we pay for it up front. But it is that's a big chunk of change. And so we can order it and not pay for it until it's delivered, but we will not get a 5% savings. Roughly 5%, right? Is it exactly 5% then?
I believe it's.
Okay, it's roughly $100,000.
It's all very general. They haven't given us a specific.
Right.
Well,
Down to the penny.
my question on that rescue is, you know, I did a little research and why are we buying a new rescue rig? Why do we need a rescue rig for a two-station, you know, for our two stations? Is it a shared thing that Shoreline's gonna pick up 63% and we pick up 38%, or are we being asked to, as North Shore, to buy a rescue rig for the whole north end? And also, how often is it called out?
Right.
I mean, I think it was 5 calls is all it was last year.
Well,
And so, you know, why do we need to spend $2 million on that? I mean, that's the question I have up front.
it was due to be replaced a couple of years ago. It was on a 15-year life cycle replacement.
Mhm.
We bumped it up to 20 years to try and get a little bit, you know, more value out of it.
Right.
North Shore chose to replace all of their apparatus. It's not under the Shoreline contract.
Right, I understand that.
This is an apparatus that North Shore owns. It's overdue for replacement. It'll be beyond 20 years by the time we receive it. Even if even though we're extending, it was supposed to be purchased a couple of years ago.
I got that part.
Okay,
Do we need, with 5 calls a year, do we need to have a rescue rig? You know, there's, I think Bellevue has one, Shoreline has, Seattle has one. And it's very seldom called out, and they will support us. Do we need to have that? And then if we eliminate it, we eliminate what, $100,000 worth of training and additional costs that we could put someplace else. That I'm just putting it out there. This is a big chunk for 5 calls a year and a lot of training, a yearly training, or something we use very seldom, and then we have regional support that can cover it if we have that.
Can we put a pause on this? Is it only 5 calls a year?
it's more, well, I don't know how many calls it is a year.
Okay.
But we are going to be expanding the use of it.
Yeah.
And that's something that is being planned for, you know, starting hopefully on January 1.
Right.
But and to use it more than what is being used now.
Yeah.
It's not an in-service unit, so it's not being used, you know, as much as it could be. Will it ever get used a ton? No,
Okay.
it probably won't. But it serves a need, you know,
Yeah.
and there isn't anything in our area. And you're absolutely right. There's one in Bellevue and there's one in Seattle.
So
But
should we
there's-
ask for shared see if, if like Shoreline and Bothell would want to come in and share like we do with the consortium. The cost of it, why should North Shore pick up $2 million worth of the cost? When, when it's it's just doesn't make logical sense. If I was in business, I would say scratch that part.
That is an operational decision. If you scratch that rescue, then you're scratching our, being able to respond to confined space, trench, mechanical, high, low angle, all those rescues. We just got a bunch of equipment from the light rail project to put on the truck and the rescue. And it is our obligation to be able to respond to train rescues now, in addition to the confined space and all those other types of rescues. It is the reason.
Can Shoreline jump in and pick up some of the cost of it?
We picked up the cost of a truck and ordering an additional truck last year. We spent over $4 million last year on apparatus in Shoreline. And to fulfill a different, it's similar but different need, in that we're picking up, specialized apparatus, equipment, things of that nature. This is a North Shore apparatus. Right. This is one that you've had for 15, 20 years.
No, I'm not
we are looking at expanding the use of it to make it more worthwhile. We cannot walk away from the rescue side of what we do.
No.
That is an obligation and a level of service that our communities, expect, and that we have 30, I think we have 30 or 32 technicians right now, and we are planning on moving them to 51 and being able to cross staff that with the engine to be able to use it on more calls and so forth. I've already started having some conversation with Bothell to help potentially support this, but that will also be dependent on whether or not what Bothell does long term as far as the fire department. We cannot rely on Bellevue and Seattle to get here in a timely enough manner if we do have a rescue. We will put our firefighters in danger, and we would have to completely walk away from the rescue side of this. If we're not going to, I will not feel comfortable putting our people in harm's way if we're not going to support them with the proper training, proper equipment, and so forth. So could that be done with fire engine responses? Some of it can, like high angle, it doesn't require a lot of, equipment, but the other things that we do, and you're right, it's not a lot of calls that are the actual technical rescue calls, but there are calls that we have each year, but we are planning on expanding the use of it. This is a North Shore apparatus that this was a conscious decision that the North Shore board made in not joining and transferring money into the Shoreline Fire Department to cover, apparatus purchases.
Right.
So it's overdue now. It'll be overdue by the time we order it, even if we ordered it today.
I would just like to interject a little bit. I would be very, very uncomfortable moving away from being a rescue qualified organization.
Right.
These are high risk, low frequency events. A technical rescue response requires a minimum of 3 rescue apparatus. So if North Shore is one of those, we're still depending on the surrounding jurisdictions to provide the other 2. And that's a minimum. There's likely going to be 4 to 5 rescues at any major event. Right. And so to go away from the 20 years of history of being a rescue qualified organization is a big step backwards in level of service.
Just want to bring it up.
It's a very good question because it doesn't go on very many calls.
Yeah.
I have a question just about the how soon, I guess, do we need to commit to the purchase process, and what are the pros and cons of kind of waiting for, as opposed to, but I feel like the $2 million number is sort of a new number right now as we're sitting here. It's not a number that we've been sitting with for a long time to think about.
Yeah.
And so now, we're being asked, do we want to make this big transfer from reserves, et cetera, to cover that? But it's kind of, it's a number that we haven't been sitting with for some time. But I guess in general, I feel like the philosophy that we tried to embody in our reserve resolution and just in our in holding some funds in reserves, we were trying to kind of forecast out these type of capital expenses over time so that we can, you know, budget for them smoothly over time as opposed to having them come up kind of more suddenly. So I guess I'm wondering, I think maybe it would be it would allow us to do that more over time if we took a longer approach to think.
We can defer. I want to caution you all. I've gone through the RCL. I think that's it's the study the robust study that was done on all of this. It was severely underfunded. Their cost projections were not anywhere close to what it needed to be. We are severely underfunded in our capital replacement. I would agree with you that we should have a 20-year plan and be looking at the 20 years worth of purchases and funding each of those to the point of when it comes due in 2027, that we have the funds approximately ballpark, you know, that we can say, yeah, we're buying whatever it is. We are not in that position right now. We do not have anywhere near the funds available in our capital fund to do that. You're right, the $2 million purchase. I've been talking about the rescue for a while, but the $2 million, that was a surprise to me as well. We have not committed to this. We don't have a firm price on it because this is a big decision. And you know, you're absolutely right. This is a very big decision, you know, and it is a high risk, low frequency type calls and all that. If we're going to make the purchase, you know, or defer the purchase, you know, if we're going to make, I believe we need to make the purchase in 2024. Whether we pay for it in 2024 is I believe the question that you need to answer. But we don't have that price firmly done because we haven't built it. We haven't spec'd it out. I was looking for what we were going to do, or are we going to kill the purchase entirely? And you know, I'm not going to have staff work on spec'ing this out, but I am expecting in early 2024 to define the spec. We've already missed the price. They jumped the prices here at the end of this year. We won't be able to get that. But if we don't make the purchase earlier in 2024, then there's going to be another price hike that'll come down. Well, I don't expect these prices to come down. No, they will either stabilize or they will continue to go up.
I wonder, is there, because it sounds like this is something that's still subject to some specification and maybe even some discussion by this group, is there something that we could budget for that would be essentially a placeholder of the down payment that would allow us to continue with the process if we elect to purchase, you know, start the purchase process as soon as you would like to, but that is short of putting, you know, taking the $2 million right now and transferring it from.
That's a great question. They typically, because I guess I'll cast some stones. The manufacturers know that they have you. So until you've signed on the dotted line and committed to the spec, the price is variable until you get to that point. It doesn't matter about the down payment. You know, are you committing to what rig are you committing to? Because when you sign on the dotted line, that gets you the place in the production. And that's when they lock in the prices. Now, we don't need to put a down payment. I don't believe we need to put a down payment down. We either need to choose that we're going to purchase it up front or we're going to defer it. You know, and so I don't believe there's a down payment. There's just a commitment from us.
Okay.
You know, to purchase it. There might be. I don't know. Do you know of anything different?
You're correct.
Okay.
It's just signing on.
So, and we're looking at a specific bigger rig than what we have now. What I think
Yes.
a trailer and a pickup truck right now is not what we.
So right now we have our rescue that we have right now is a medium duty rescue. This would be a heavy duty rescue. The rescue that we have now is not capable of all the equipment and everything that we need to put on it. That's why we're upgrading to a heavy rescue. A medium rescue would be, I don't know, $300,000-$400,000 cheaper. I don't know how much cheaper it'd be. But if we're looking at a 20-year rig and looking at our current needs now, we need to go to a heavy rescue.
Okay, and how much of this heavy duty rescue is for the light rail, additional equipment that's going to light rail? I mean,
yeah.
you know, but part of it is for that, correct?
Well, part of it is, but part of it is like, for example, you know, we have right now we have an air filling station with a fragmentation chamber, you know, and that takes up space and so forth. we could potentially strip some of that out and we actually there, and in the budget is about 17,000, I think 17.5. To retrofit and buy us some time with our current rescue. And I think, I don't know what the 17,000 will do, but I believe it's to pull off some of this stuff. And make it so that we can get some of the other equipment in that we need to. I
was just looking at that for, I know that, there's some funding coming in for your additional equipment because of the light rail.
Yeah,
Do we get any of that funding to go towards that rescue? That's one of the things that would help us is to get some help funding that.
they're not funding apparatus, they're funding the equipment that goes into the apparatus. Especially since, part of it is that we have an existing apparatus, even if it's older than, necessary. I do want to mention too, that I failed to mention that, one of the capabilities that this heavy rescue has too, is that there's the opportunity for people to be changing into other, whatever they need in the back of the rig as it's going, such as dry suits or wetsuits to go onto the water for water rescue, or to get into harnesses to go over the edge of something, or things of that nature. So there are additional capabilities beyond just carrying equipment, and there's other stuff that it does.
Yeah,
that gives us.
I understand that. I was just looking at, $2 million is, and
It's
with our capital budget, if we get funding somewhere, that'll help us.
It absolutely floored me, and I had an expletive, when I heard that it was gonna be over $2 million. And Matt can attest to this, because I was like, you gotta
And
be
3 years out too, isn't it?
and 3 years out. And that's
Ridiculous.
it's the HVAC, which is further down this list, which is 2 years out. It's everything is just it seems pretty ridiculous to me where we're at, but this is what everybody's saying. They're saying the same thing. That parts are this, well, it's like the AD stuff that we were talking about. We ordered this months and months ago, and it's still, still in process.
So, it sounds like in addition to kind of a surprise price tag on the rescue truck, that you've discovered that on the facilities side, there's a lot of things like deferred maintenance, things that need to be repaired, et cetera, that are kind of come to light in the latter part of this year, like right now going into the budget process, realizing that there's these other expenses that aren't adequately funded. So I guess my personal preference with regard to the capital budget would be we look at those items that are urgent, that are facilities needs that are urgent, and we certainly fund those, and that we defer our payment on the rescue truck till when it's constructed, and that will allow us more time to discuss the exact price, the spec, and so on. And then that we just as soon as we can move towards the approach of having that detailed forecast out, so that we're so we can
Get a new study done so that we can.
and make sure that we adequately fund it.
Yeah. So I developed, and I shared with Eric, I can share it with all of you if you'd like, a 20-year budgeting forecast for all apparatus, equipment, et cetera, facilities, that I've done for Shoreline. And what I'd like to do is take that and incorporate it into, and kind of, I don't personally need all the detail that's in that RCL study, like striping the parking lot. Okay, I don't really care about that. I care about the big ticket items, the things that are going to impact our budget, and I'd like to mesh those two things together. And this was a goal that we had for this year for Matt, but he's had zero bandwidth to deal with this piece of it. It's high priority for us to address it in 2024, to mesh what I just mentioned, which is the budgeting with the details, so that we can open up a binder at any time with a rolling 3-year, because 3 years, you can fairly accurately predict what the next few years is going to look like. 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years. I mean, it gets worse and worse the further out you go. But what I'd like to do is have a binder that has like a rolling 3-year, or every 3 years we'd be updating those things. And that's what I'd really like to get to. So you have confidence that we're accurately budgeting for when these, especially the bigger ticket items, when they come due, that it's not, we're completely over budget and have to steal from different funds or or increase the fire benefit charge at a higher rate, or, you know, things of that nature. But we have to catch up. And that's the situation right now, is that we have to catch up, whether we defer the rescue. That's fine, but we, you know, if we're deferring the rescue, that means we also need to be putting money aside over the next 2-3 years.
Right.
To be able to fund that $2 million purchase. So, you know, we defer the $2 million purchase, don't save the $100,000, but we also need to add another 600,000, 700,000, 800,000, whatever it is in 2024 and in 2025 to be able to pay it in 2026. So, you know, we are in this situation where it's going to be painful over the next 2-3 years. And I'm sorry that I couldn't give you more. I didn't realize how bad the situation was until over the last month or two, that when we were going through the budget, I was like, okay, let's look at facilities, let's look at equipment, let's look at apparatus. And then, you know, coming into, I have mentioned some of these things over this last year, but I did not realize that we were in as bad a situation until we started actually trying to look at what we were going to do in 2024.
So Chief, looks like 2 million is the rescue. And so let's take a look, if you guys are ready, I think, let's take a look at the other. Sure. Is it 2.5 or 2.6, whatever it is, in facilities, and just putting this out there, I would like to see. Okay, we've been dramatically underfunded for a number of years. We've got all this deferred maintenance, right? So what are the items that have to be done right now? And what are the items that would be a really good idea to do right now? And is there anything that we can defer out, kind of limp along, right, to try to not have, you know, a $5 million hole blown in our reserve budget?
Right. There are a couple of things I think that we can defer. Just for the sake of argument, especially because I know it was a big hit, I looked at removing the rescue, including everything else, which we can defer a couple of those things, I think, but what that looked like from an apples to apples comparison, you know, and how much of an impact that had on the equivalent levy rate and where that was at, with 600,000 going in. And in effect, it's about a 4 cent, you know, or so decrease on the overall levy rate. It would go further if we defer any of the other items that I would, and then there's a couple of them that I'm like, those are nice to haves, maybe not have to haves, you know. Yeah. And
I think that what, you know, the board and probably the community is going to struggle with is that we've got this history of being very, very, very fiscally conservative, and to the point of our own detriment at times, right? Like not buying equipment, or not that is necessary, and not doing maintenance that's necessary. So now it's caught us, right? And we're in a pickle. But going to the citizens and asking for this, or having them look at this budget and say, whoa, what's happening here? Why has this happened? How can we mitigate that, right, and kind of strike a halfway? Like, this is stuff that has to be done because of a history of underfunding the organization, right? And then also communicating out that in order to maintain this organization in a fashion that is responsible, it's going to be more expensive. And it's going to be more expensive, for example, more expensive in similar fashion to the way that the citizens of Bothell pay, and the citizens of Kirkland pay, and the citizens of Shoreline pay, right? So we've kept our taxes very low here to our own detriment, and taking the services of the surrounding organizations, and now it's time to catch up. But to catch up all at once,
it's a lot.
It's too much.
Okay. Well, we'll go through the rest of it, and then you guys can give me some direction as to how to modify the budget, you know, after this meeting, because that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight, is to get the input and have this discussion so that I can finalize the budget and prepare resolutions for our next meeting. So, do you want me to control it, or it might be easier? That's at the top. There's a lot of equipment in here, but it's really, low level stuff, thousands instead of tens. I highlighted some of these things that I think are potentially, things that we can, that we should potentially discuss and all that, but I'll go through all of them. We've got an HVAC boiler replacement 51 that has to be, I'm gonna talk about the things I think that have to be done. We deferred on the lighting projects, the server room. That's potentially something that doesn't have to be done. Actually, I can do it.
We just did something with the server room recently, right?
That was the AC, portion of it, keeping it cool and all that. This would be to replace the sprinkler system with a non-water sprinkler. It is a risk, if we have a problem in there and the sprinkler head goes off.
It's not a halon.
And then halon's not, you don't do halon.
They don't do anything, don't like killing
So,
people.
I will say the only reason why I would say is something that we could potentially punt on this and kick it down the road. Is because we have done a much better job, and Zeb's not here right now, but of backing up between 61 and 51. So I think maybe it's I think we lose about 3 days of data. Something like, I think that's our cushion right now. I will share with you that this has been in the shoreline budget for about 6 years, and I have kicked it down the road every single year. Partly because, I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll defer it, and part of it is just bandwidth and getting it done. And I'm gonna try and make some priorities.
So we don't have this page, so what is that, 25,000?
25,000.
It's on that long one.
Yeah, I think the line one that's.
Cuts off. It only went down to motor.
Yeah, let me.
So,
You can.
That's right, let's continue to look at your.
That's where-
there.
Yeah.
So, let's see, the outbuilding and the carport, these are estimates only, and actually it's an item that DC Hochstein can give us an update on later. I think it's an agenda item. The 57 generator replacement, I thought this was something that we could, kick down the road a little bit further, but then as we were getting through the budget process, Patrick, quote unquote, told us it's on life support. It's undersized, and it's about to, it's beyond its service life, and it's gonna fail. It's actually failing during tests, on a weekly, maybe not weekly basis, but it is failing when we go through our tests on it. So I would say that it's not something that we can actually, defer. I had it originally as something that we could defer, but I don't think we should defer that. The 51 generator fuel tank, this might be more of a nice to have. So I would say that this is, please weigh in on, this better, this stuff better than I do, so.
The fuel tank on the 51 generator is undersized, so it requires a transfer of fuel every 8 hours. If it was continuously running, it's a very complicated process to transfer the fuel. Over the last couple of years, going back to when Chief Morris was here, he was working on a lot. Ned was working on it, and it's never been resolved to work effectively. So the proposal is to increase the size of the fuel tank on the generator, but also to increase some fuel tanks on site to transfer the fuel more effectively and smoothly. So it also ties into the potential for putting on the next item a fueling station for the apparatus here at 51 with the larger fuel tanks that cycle the diesel and fuel, more often through the system, which is healthier for the fuel itself, right? So it doesn't sit there. And it would allow us to have a fuel station in East Battalion and at a more affordable rate cost of fuel than what we pay NUD when we go over there to their gas station. So in the big picture, it's some money down now, but we're improving the reliability of our generator and saving money for not having to rely on NUD and pay their rates for fuel.
Is that generator, is that a above ground fuel
Yeah.
tank?
Is that station, it's 51 fueling station? That's the next item underneath
Yeah.
the fuel tank.
Yeah.
So
Or is that
is
50
there any other driver of us moving away from NUD, or it's just because we would have the ability to have our own independent fueling station?
Yeah, it would give us, it would allow us to be independent with it and save the money.
Thank you.
Reduce the cost of the fuel overall. And,
80 grand for that?
And
40
then,
grand.
have the system that runs with the generator simultaneously.
Chief, I can't read the numbers, and then also anybody that's listening or looking online. Or want to listen to the recording later, won't know what the numbers are, so if you could just say what the numbers are, would be really helpful.
Thank you. That's a great point. They should be able to see it, but you're right, from a recording standpoint. So the station 51 generator fuel tank at 20,000 and the fueling station at 80,000.
Just if we were to replace the generator, would we need to replace the generator fuel tank? As a stopgap?
That was station 57's
Yeah.
generator.
Gotcha.
Should I print the full 5 pages?
How many more pages of this do we have?
It's not much more.
No.
So your thoughts on this?
I think with what we're having nowadays, I think as far as the fueling goes, I'd wait a year for that, put it in our budget next year. Yes, that's one of the ones where I think we can cut some of our capital budget on it. Nudge available. That's just my feelings on that. That's 80,000. Not change.
Are you saying defer on both of them? I think they're are they completely tied together?
No,
Okay. Well, what's the board's feeling on the fuel tank?
Yeah, I guess I'm not as comfortable as Rick is in deferring things. I feel like we're in this position because we've deferred and deferred. So, I guess I'm not ready to just put it into the next budget already. I don't want. I think it's easy to look at these numbers and go, holy cow, these are huge numbers. And let's put them off 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, but there's also things that need to be taken care of. So I guess I'd want to know which priority are we A, B, or C, and then maybe make a better.
I would say that if we could defer the station 51 fuel station, if you were wanting to defer something, but the generator, increasing the generator fuel tank would be probably a bigger priority right now.
And that's what I was gonna recommend as well.
That's what I think.
Even more important than both of those is the 57 generator.
Okay, and that was the
That's the one above the-
150,000?
That's
Or
this
ish.
one,
150.
150,000.
Okay.
Sorry, David's right. It's that 57 generator project is 150,000.
Okay.
And we didn't defer that.
Okay.
And I'm not interested in deferring that. That's.
Okay.
It has to.
Okay,
But the $80,000 for
We'll
fuel
defer.
station,
I'm highlighting the ones that we're gonna defer.
okay, I see. Thank you.
that's when we.
Okay.
We still have a facility that works and we can.
So mattresses and
Okay.
recliners, we have, here's this one, I'm gonna highlight the station 54 repair and remodel. It was proposed at 200,000, I decreased it to 100,000. I have absolutely no idea, we have at $100,000 in Rick. We have leaks and we have building issues. I don't know what we're going to need to spend, but we are going to need to spend something in 2024 to address the water drain issues and the leaks and so forth, and or either to take the building down or to do some repair work to it to make sure it doesn't fall down further. I don't know if 100,000 is enough, but I put that as a place.
Are these like roof leaks, or it says there's a 60K gallon water leak? Does that mean that our meter is running because like we have a water supply line that's broken?
We lost 60,000 gallons of water in a domestic water leak somewhere, and then they shut the water off.
Right.
And we have a $1,500 bill because of it. We also have water drainage onto the property that we are still trying to figure out if it is ours or if it's a neighbor's property. Issue, but we have potentially site, property drain issues and domestic water leak issues. The water is shut off right now, so it's not leaking. But if we turn it back on, I'm guessing it would start leaking immediately.
Shut off and then locked.
And locked.
Can't be turned on.
And so
Okay.
we also have roof issues, wall issues, etc.
That water leak that's shut off, is that supplying anything essential or what is this?
So
Is that,
it was
Just
the
the
bathroom.
domestic water supply.
It's the bathroom and kitchen, which are
but I mean, that station has water right now.
No,
it's shut off. 54.
54.
This is 54.
54.
Sorry,
Okay,
sorry,
I was getting
54.
mixed up
I know,
here.
I was like, wait a second. what's happening?
Okay.
Station
Okay.
54, sorry.
Yeah.
I'll try to be clear.
That's okay, I should have just read it, said 54.
I don't see a whole lot of purpose into putting money into that station.
Mm-mm.
I think the foreseeable future is probably to knock it down and consider what's gonna go next.
I completely agree. I think we have to figure out what's going on with the water that's draining onto the property. That's a minimum.
Is that a study that's happening now?
We're in the process, we've contracted with TCA and a survey person and it's a
Soils.
and a soils and thank you, geotech analysis.
Digging the ditches.
Right, so they're doing both right now to figure out where our property lines are, so we can figure out where the leak is. They're also doing a test of the soil itself to figure out what in the future, if we were to look at doing anything. That to figure out what potentially challenges we would have and or whether or not we would need that easement piece, that little piece that's behind it or not. So right now, we're doing work to figure out what our options are for the future. But the survey and then we can go back and say, okay. This leak is coming from on our property or not on our property, and we can either go to the other people's property and ask them to fix it. Or if it's on our property, we have to start digging and replacing, at least the drains.
You mean, are we causing like damage to other properties by the water coming through that property? Or why are we concerned about the groundwater issue? If it's only damaging our own property and it's a groundwater issue, maybe it's not that concerning right now since it's a useless to say.
but we wouldn't
Actually, you know
know.
what? That's not a point.
It's fine, but until we find out from the engineers what's going on, we need to.
Well, I'm not saying we stop the survey work, but I'm just saying,
Well,
we may not need to do anything to
If you walk
address.
around that property at the wrong time, you'll go up to your ankles.
Yes.
But I mean, that's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Property or anything.
Some school kids in
Well,
there.
remember too, that we've had meetings with community that want to use the property for a garden or a bus stop or, a baby drop off and, there are proposals out there for using the property for, and so at some point we will have to figure out what we're going to do. That's something that's for another day to discuss what we're gonna do, but you do have an interesting point of. Do we need to address? I'm putting some money in there because we are going to spend some money. I just
Yeah.
don't know what.
Okay.
Station 57 workstation, I deferred that. The station 57 HVAC upgrade. It's
Big
also
one.
on some life support and will take 2 years to replace. So if it breaks, we'll pay more. And it still may be further out. I don't know I don't know how comfortable I feel with deferring this.
Well, the part with that too is. Is it we have 2 units working there, HVAC units, and now we're talking about completely tearing everything out and putting stuff on the roof. Is that, we need to look at that and see, do we just replace the 2 units and be good for another 20 years? Or,
Yeah,
I
do you know anything more?
Beyond this, the best summary is what's written there, if you want to just read that.
All right, I'll read it.
Remember addressing this
So-
with Chief Morris
Mhm.
last
Yeah,
year.
so Chief Morris has been looking at a few options to improve or replace the HVAC system at Station 57. The current system is original to the building, which was built around 1993. According to PSR Mechanical, who did the evaluation, the system is approaching the end of its service life and due for replacement. If we have a failure in any of the 3 AC condensers, the only option is a full replacement at approximately $100,000 per unit. There are 3. A proposal was made in the 2021 remodel to update the whole system or adding individual mini split heat/AC units to the bedrooms as an improvement. However, with a cost of over $100,000 and concerns about electrical load, we opted to not pursue that and plan for a whole building upgrade. We had a follow-up conversation with PSR Mechanical, and they indicated due to planning, permitting, equipment delays, and install time, this project would take approximately 2 years to complete and have a cost in the range of $500,000 to $600,000 each. Yeah,
Look at all these.
yeah, let's just do this so that.
Part of the recommendation is also to upgrade 57, so to have individual, so each like bedroom can be controlled at their own temperature, just like our other stations, including this station.
And this would be a full building upgrade to a modern Mitsubishi zone.
Yeah, I thought we had that done in the last remodel.
So I guess what if we, let's say that just from the standpoint of this is a kind of a new big number. Like if we did not do this and we had a failure of one of the 3 AC units, condensers, would we have to spend $300,000 or would we have to spend $100,000 to replace the one?
I believe 100,000 per.
But would we have to replace them all if one failed, or would we just have to replace that one?
I believe just the one.
Yeah, and then they talked about upgrading to individual controls for each one of the bedrooms. So that's a chunk. How much was that part of it? It's gonna be a chunk of change there. Individual controls and fan units and.
This just seems like it's potentially,
I think it's just the one to answer your question, but they're all, if one's failing, it's an indication that they're all the same age.
right?
Yeah.
So
This just seems like a type of a situation where there could be some scoping of the project, the endpoint that we want to get to, like what the relative cost would be.
BC Hansen is on this call. He spec'd this out with Chief Morris originally, and if he might have some more information if you want them to chime in.
Do you guys want to hear?
Yeah, I'd
Detail?
love to hear
Sure.
from Chief Moore or Chief Hansen.
Hi, good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, when we looked at it during the remodel, and unfortunately, I think the remodel just was getting a little bit out of hand or going beyond the scope of what the original was, and so that's the choice was made by the commissioners at that point in time to put off the HVAC upgrade. We met with anyways, a couple of different mechanical contractors and had them look at it. And the consensus, and this was a few years ago, was that yes, the outdoor units were all at the end of their life, and they are the old refrigerant, not compatible with anything that's current. So it'd be the $100,000 per unit if we lost AC. And that building's always had the problem with the bedrooms in the summertime. They're really warm, and in the wintertime, or vice versa. Anyhow, because people open the windows, it's always been an issue at that station. So it was recognized that we'd like to upgrade the station so it's kind of more modern, like 51 and 63. And so it would be a large outdoor unit that would be placed in the gravel behind the station, out by the gas meter, by the barbecue area, and then would be individual controls for all the different bedrooms and all the different areas of the station, similar to what 51 and 63 are. But it's a major thing because they have to go up, rip out all the old stuff, and then it's all new electrical and new the piping for the refrigerant has to be run all throughout the building. There would be a large power, I believe, a power reduction for the building because we're going to the new modern system is supposed to be much more energy efficient, as opposed to the current air conditioning. But anyhow, that's all.
That reminds me too, that there's some efficiency requirements that are coming down on commercial buildings and so forth too, that some of this may, if we don't do it, we may start getting fined. They're gonna do efficiency evaluations on all commercial structures. 2026, I think, was it, do you remember? 2026?
26, I believe.
And so, things like this, may be required for us to do it at some point anyway, even if it wasn't end of life, which this is.
Is this something that we would go out for different bids or because we have a bid from PSR for a contract?
No, we would, this is something we absolutely have to go out to bid on, or use MRSC, for identifying, which actually we can talk about the challenges with MRSC later too. But this is absolutely something that would have to go out to bid, because there's multiple agencies or companies out there that could do this work.
So right now you tagged 600,000 for this?
Yes.
I feel like this is not a push off thing. I think you're asking people to possibly be extremely uncomfortable and then asking them to go work at top form. So
The
to
bigger
me,
challenge would be if something fails too.
well, I think it needs to be done. I don't think we should be pushing that off personally, but
I think we could do something with it, but it's a 2-year process, so we put 300 this year and 300 into the 25 budget.
Do you know if we can?
I mean, that
We probably
that's
can.
probably appropriate, because it's gonna take some time to get through this.
You're not gonna pay for it all at once.
Actually, I'm just gonna take that. But I got multiple changes on your things.
So
And that's a way we can defer it
yeah,
and still have,
still get it.
yeah, we
sort
gotta
of.
get our equivalent rate down and it's.
Yeah,
and I think the only other thing that we haven't discussed is the final item on the capital budget,
Yeah, and this is one I think we can defer.
the TCA assessment.
Yeah.
Second floor TCA assessment.
Yeah,
For 57,
the advantage is, or the proposal here is to. The generator that we need to replace, put that outside the building. And then that would free up space to potentially put a stairwell to a second floor over that area of the building. Where we could put the PT room. This would allow us to do a reworking of the day room and dorms and be able to get an additional dorm space in there so that we could have an aid car overnight there. Right now, the aid car is a peak hour aid car that has to go. We don't have space for them, to be there. If we want to look into the future and long term of whether or not we want to have an aid car there overnight, we would need to do something like that. This is something that can be, kicked down the road.
I think next year,
So,
for 25.
And this is a placeholder just to do the design work and the analysis of whether or not it's even feasible. So this is one we can defer to 2025 or later depending.
So I feel like my personal thought with regard to this capital budget would be that we defer the rescue truck. And that we defer the items that we've discussed deferring here, but then otherwise we approve the other items that are in here that are more urgent.
The only thing I don't like about it is the $100,000 that would cost in interest savings, and then probably an increase in charge if the prices were to go up on the rescue unit. And it's a bill that we're gonna be paying no matter what.
mhm.
And you said it was like a 3-cent difference in the,
So once I would suggest that we early in 2024, as soon as we feasibly can, we lock in what we're going to buy, so we lock in the price. Because once we do that and sign on, we get a spot in the production line and we lock in the price. And we wouldn't be incurring some of the other potential increases in price that'll occur. So the sooner that we can do that, the better off we are in that sense. But either way, we will lose out on the 5%, the $100,000 in savings. But it's, to everybody, I think everybody's point here is like, it softens the blow for next year, but we incur an extra $100,000 in overall cost, so.
I just feel like we have so many kind of like unexpected capital expenses. On top of that, we had some capital projects like the station the 251 outbuilding and so on, that I think as we were having that discussion of how much that was going to cost, we didn't necessarily anticipate that we were going to have all this other costs. We have that on top of all this, so I feel like it would sort of be nice to average it out a little bit over time. But I do you know, I recognize that we're gonna.
Chief, does it make sense to look at the expense of the outbuilding and move forward, but at a slower pace, so that gives us an opportunity to save money and prepare for that expense?
The outbuilding?
Yeah.
Or, so, that one is kind of, I'm somewhere in between. It's kind of not, it's kind of more than just nice to have it here sooner than later, because it removes the impact, well, you can see the names. It removes the impact, you know, on this building. And that becomes especially important, you know, if there is a move for us to look into the future with Bothell as well. Space will be a huge premium here in this building, and the wear and tear, and not just the wear and tear, but the impacts with people in the building and the use of the facility and all that. That would help us with that piece of it. It would protect our apparatus better. We'd have more storage and all that, and part of that is also the carport, you know, to protect our staff vehicles and so forth. So I think it's maybe not a shall, but it's definitely not a nice either. It's something that needs to happen. Does it have to happen next year? I would like it to happen. I think it should happen, but it potentially could get kicked to 2025.
Well, I'm definitely on board. I think that it is more than a nice to have, but we also agreed to that prior to all of these new capital expenses that we were not expecting. Right. So I want that project to move forward, but can we investigate a way to defer some of the expenses, allow us to save for that project rather than outlaying $600,000 in 2024?
I don't know if it's going to be very possible to defer some of those payments, because it's a short-term project. It's not going to take very long to do it, so it's not going to take like 2 years to get this done. It'll probably be a few months, you know, with electrical and stuff, it'll take longer than that, but the building itself will go up fairly quickly. We are already getting money or some revenue in to help defer the cost of that with the current academy. You know, so as we have more academies and so forth, we will continue to, you know, have some of that money come in to help defer that cost, but we're not gonna magically come up with $300,000. You know, I think it's about 30,000 in this current academy. You know, the next academy is probably be quite a bit less, because right now, you know, there's not very much enrollment for for the January academy. So maybe there's only a few $1,000s in it for that one. I don't know, but over time, you know, we will get the money replaced, but it's at some point it's going to be a chunk of change that we're going to have to come up with to pay for it. You know, and you know, we're estimating at 500,000. You know, we can talk about what it's an agenda item here later, but I guess at that point you guys can tell me, you know, to go forward with it or not. So I think we're at the point. I'll just jump forward a little bit because I think it's germane to what we're talking about. We've got 2 bids from on the project, you know, and we cannot get a third.
Yeah, we might get that third.
Oh, we might get the third.
We made some progress today on it.
Okay, so well, that's good. That's good to hear. And so I was gonna get an update from DC Hochstein on this, and then I was gonna ask for a board decision at our special meeting in 2 weeks, you know, on this, to whether or not we move forward or not. You know, we've estimated 500,000, you know, I think it was 200 and something for the structure itself from the initial estimate, but we also have to run electrical and permitting and stairs and stuff like that. So 500,000 might be high, it might be low, or it might be, you know, just perfect. I'm not sure, but we are taking 2 million off of this. So, you know, so we're going to see quite a bit of, you know, and we're taking a couple, and we're doing some other things here. I think you're going to see some decent relief. It's not, you know, the equivalent levy rate is still going to go up. There's no way that it's not going to go up, you know, with AV going down and everything else, and the prices and everything else going up. But how much, I was trying to meter it out so it wasn't as much. I think a bigger question is where do you guys want the funds, back to the funds thing? where you want the balances, if you want me to pull money out of the general expense and the reserve to help defer, or not defer, but to pay for these things and, meter out and defer some of these impacts.
Well, I think we have two discussions, so we should
Good.
probably resolve our capital discussion
Yep.
and then talk about our reserve fund discussion.
I'd agree.
So, I think that, we've gone through the big items that we see here and figured the ones that we can defer. And split, I think, one of the 2 years that we're gonna do. I think we're sitting there pretty much resolved as a group to that.
I think the only one that we haven't really agreed upon is with as a group right now is, do we want to just go ahead and go with the 251 outbuilding and budget for that to happen now? Or for it?
The only thing I have to add is. And that the bigger part of that is a consortium
Mhm.
use. And I need a budget from the consortium saying how North Shore is gonna get reimbursed for that. It's just a. A shadow, a cloud out there saying we're gonna get reimbursed over the next few years. But that's not how we run a business. We need to say, okay, we got funding. There's a need for that, and the consortium is for the consortium. How are we gonna put fund, or, charge $10 more per candidate that works there? What happens? How do we pay for it? And how does North Shore get reimbursed for those buildings? It's a legitimate question.
It is a legitimate question. It's not only for the consortium. And I sent you the budget where I detailed out the per capita costs that I'm allocating to the outbuilding. There is a formula, that I've, detailed. What we don't know is what the true cost is of the project.
Right, we don't know that.
Once we have that, I'll update the formula. I can send the formula to you again.
It isn't that, it's just that. The formula is saying how much we're gonna charge, but but we don't have that. Tied into our budget saying that we're gonna get reimbursed. For that, it's just
I see what he's saying is he's looking for a projected reimbursement dollar amount in the budget
Yeah.
for the structure. If you're charging a certain amount.
Yeah.
I have that, I've sent that projection out.
Mhm.
But I don't
Assuming-
see it in the budget.
No, it's not, you're right, it's not in this budget.
And if we don't have it there, how do we track it in the future?
Well,
I mean,
I can't guarantee that there's gonna be people that are gonna be contributing to this because it depends on how many people are here for an academy.
okay,
I have averaged it out and said if we have 20 students per year or per class,
Mhm.
That a portion of that would be paid, they would be paying that per capita surcharge for the outbuilding. And if we did 2 of those academies a year, then, it's X amount of dollars projected. I've sent that
I know,
budget.
it's
It's
not-
not in this budget. I can't guarantee that amount is there.
okay, I understand, but we need to have some way of tracking it in the future. We're asking to put out $500,000 or whatever we're doing for this 2 buildings. One, I know the car parts, the carport is for us,
Right.
so that's not an issue, but that big building is 90% consortium. So how do we track it and get it in a budget, so every year we can say, okay, we put this out, we paid back.
Well, where does the revenue go?
Yeah,
It's gonna drop into our capital budget.
No, I mean, right now, the funds that you collect from like the consortium and the academies. and
We haven't
stuff.
collected it yet, but we're gonna drop it into the capital budget.
Right. But we need to drop it in the capital budget and track it so we know where we're at on the building. That's what I'm saying. It's just a cloud out there. It's not, there's no way of tracking what we're doing. And it's not how to do business. We need to know how we,
I think that's an excellent point. I don't know if it's necessarily the exact same point that we have to resolve right now, just in terms of determining the timing of, because we had the subcommittee and we've kind of had the discussion about the pros and cons of the structure, and we've made the decision that we want to move forward with that structure.
correct.
So I think your point is well taken, that it would be nice to have a way of somehow tracking revenues that come in that help offset that expense. But I think for right now, I think what we ought to decide is, do we want to move forward with that expense in 2024 Or do we not, or do we want to defer it? And I feel like my recommendation would be that we do, just because we have all the momentum, we've done the research from the committee, that we go ahead and move on that in 2024.
I agree.
I agree.
We just need a way of tracking the revenues.
So then just to kind of bring a wrap to the capital discussion, then I feel like, I think you feel like you have adequate guidance based on our discussion right now. Okay.
Yeah, I do. And I would totally agree with you that we need to track it. I just, I'm trying to brainstorm of like how to track it. Because it's not gonna be every year. It's not gonna be a set amount every year.
No,
It might be 0 one year, it might be 30,000 the next year, or 5 or 10, But tracking that so that you have that the board has confidence of the reimbursement that we are projecting. And, and frankly, if we get there to that, whatever that level is in 5 years, great. If it's 10 years or 20 years, whatever it is, we still need to feel confident that we're getting reimbursed for the amount that we believe is appropriate to bill to those academies and or other, entities.
it's a surcharge to each person.
Exactly, yes.
So
I'm totally with you
that
about
will be
tracking.
accountable. We got 20 candidates next
Right.
term. There should be a X amount of dollars. We can say per capita, this is what we're gonna get.
Yeah.
And
I'm totally on board with, and I will develop something that maybe can be a supplemental or separate from this, something that tracks it, as these academies come through, and how much money on a rolling basis, total, like it's this much this academy, that means total this, then total this, and then we're tracking it going into the capital. Dropping it into the capital fund is easy because there's going to be a transaction there, but being able to report out to you all about how much and how much we're told, on a rolling basis every year. It's now 40,000. It's now 62,805.
important that we do it.
Yeah,
It's the
exactly.
revenue. And then otherwise, the revenue, we can't control our
No,
spending. if we
I'm
don't
totally on
control
board with that. I can't put it in this because it's not gonna be.
Yeah.
Except where I can show it as a revenue, I suppose, but it's not, I can't predict it, I guess is what I'm saying. Putting it into this budget, I could say. I could put $50,000 in there for next year, but I have absolutely no idea if it's gonna be 0 or 50,000.
So just to keep our discussion moving, I think our next thing we're going to discuss is the fund balances.
Right. Thank you. So,
Just before we move on, because this was very
In depth.
for the benefit of the public and myself. Can we just quickly go through the ones that we are deferring or skipping this year, the ones that we're breaking? Right. So just from the top, where if you have the scrolling.
So we are going to be deferring the rescue 250 or 151 purchase. So we will not be incurring the $2.1 million purchase in 2024 and defer the cost until we receive the apparatus in 3-ish years.
And then what are we, just to finish this, are we putting $500,000?
That's our next conversation then on the fund balances, because I have that.
Yeah, let's wrap up what
Yeah.
Amy's
Okay.
question is here and then we can.
We are deferring the station 51 fueling station for $80,000.
Mhm.
And what line number is that?
61.
So 61, line 61, that's a defer.
Mhm.
We're going to spread out the next line item for HVAC at 57. Line item
I think if you scroll back up,
57.
there's one that we also addressed. You go to the $80,000 Lincoln 51 fueling station.
Yeah, I'm not deferring that.
Oh, I thought we were.
The station 51 generator fuel tank.
Fuel tank for
Fuel tank
replace.
fueling station.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one I just said.
He
Yeah.
said that.
He just said it.
He just
Yeah.
said that. Sorry. You got it.
61.
Line
61.
Okay.
Is a defer.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. It's complicated. We are deferring, we're gonna spread out. The station 57 HVAC upgrade targeted at 600,000 and spread that out because it's gonna take 2 years to complete anyway. Of approximately half in 2024 and the other half in 2025. So approximately 300,000 each year.
And that's line.
That's line 67.
Chief, what was that topic?
Oh, was that, I'm sorry?
That was the HVAC.
The station 57 HVAC upgrade. And then we are deferring line 68, the station 57, second floor PCA assessment for 100,000.
Thank you.
It's good to, it's good to, summarize. So I'm gonna move over to the fund balances, back to the fund balances. And, where you guys feel comfortable, I can explain, I've already explained it, again, it may not be as important to reduce, I mean, we are gonna see some savings and it's gonna lower the equivalent levy rate. So maybe it's not as important to get lean on some of these things, but I believe that there is some extra here. Do you want to take a break or something?
No, I had a question about the tab under BOC expenses for the election. Is that something we need to talk about now or this?
Well, we can talk about it. They didn't have any questions about that. Do you guys have any other questions?
My understanding on that item is that we really don't have a choice. It is what
Correct.
it is.
Yeah, well, it depends on, it does depend on, I'm putting the money in there for potentially a spring ballot measure. Or if it's a fall ballot measure, it may or may not come due in 2024. It depends on how fast the county bills us. But a lot of the times, the general election in the, like the election today, that bill typically, not all the time, sometimes it actually comes, it depends on how good they are in billing it. Sometimes it doesn't come due to the next year, sometimes it does come due that year. But I am budgeting for 2 election, measures. The two that would become billable in 2024. We can eliminate one of them and roll the dice if we'd like, but I felt like I was put.
So essentially you're budgeting for 2 because you're talking about doing the levy lid lift in the spring.
Potentially.
And then if it was not successful, run it again in the fall, or why are they 2?
Well, we have the ones that are going on right now,
Right?
that we will get billed for likely next year.
I see.
And then potentially an additional measure next year.
Okay, so the 2 are the current election, which we haven't been billed for this year.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And it could come due this year, and then we would be under budget for next year and over budget for this year. It just really, it's one of those, and then we have expenses like that sometimes that may come due in the current year or get pushed to the next year, depending on the time. So.
Thank you. So the 100,000, it's 2 measures. We might get billed for today's ballot measure and a potential levy lid lift in sometime in 2024.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
No, thanks for asking. So, and if there's any other questions about the expense budget, we can go through any of those as well. The fund balances, I was proposing to try and get it simpler and potentially leaner with the reserve funds to try and minimize the increase in the equipment levy rate. The equipment levy rate will go up. I don't know what it's going to go up now. It'll be, I did that apples to apples comparison with the deferring of the rescue and putting 600,000 in 2024 to help defer to come up with some of the cost of that replacement. And when I did that with everything, not deferring any of the other capital projects, but all the other capital projects, that dropped it down to $1.21. So by deferring some of the things that we just agreed on, it'll drop it further than $1.21. I just don't know how much further it'll drop it. Without, and I could do it in front of you, but I also don't want to screw things up or waste time here. So what I'll have to do is after this meeting, take any of the changes that we're talking about, recompute all the things and send it back to you guys in a final draft form, for for further review. And then, I was gonna finish this meeting with this, but basically I need all these changes, any of the changes and final approval of whatever it is, probably within the next week, so that we can prepare the resolutions for our special meeting.
So, I guess I'd like to just start off with a question, so these fund balances and these categories correspond to the resolution that defines the various reserve categories, is that correct? It looks to me like they do.
Not mostly, but not entirely, because I kind of, if you want to look at the true, that's, they have the true one, the ones that we had in the previous budget. And actually, I didn't look at the resolution. I printed it out so you can tell me if I'm incorrect or not. But we have natural disaster, insurance contingency, unplanned loss of revenue, employee benefit, equipment replacement, facilities improvement, and then non-departmental, which, by the way, I don't believe should be included in the funds, because that's interest income and cash management fees, which I moved those things into the budget. So these were the things that this is what Don had before.
Well, it'd be good to see that if we could, is that,
I think Eric saying you have a resolution that identifies those, right?
Yeah.
And it's already written, and I don't think you can deviate with those unless you make a new resolution.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what I was discussing earlier.
right?
Is that if you want to deviate from what the resolution is, I would prepare another resolution for our meeting in 2 weeks that identified that simplified it, or whatever you'd like to do. If you don't, then we can leave it the way it is. I was trying to be simpler, more efficient, and pull money out from areas that I believe are not necessary.
I think my goal personally, what I was trying to do is say, okay, we have the resolution that defines these amounts in these categories. How are we sitting right now with regard to what the resolution specifies? And then if we were to move money from reserves to pay for capital or whatever, where does that put us? So that we have a discussion of, okay, where are we now with these categories? How much are we going to take out? And then philosophically, do we want to adhere to this resolution, or do we want to make a new resolution if we think that we want to change our philosophy or our policy at all? That seems like a larger discussion though.
Right, I think philosophically, I'm on board, but the numbers in the resolution aren't gonna be accurate based on the changes that we just made, correct?
Well, no, the resolution, actually, some of the items we aren't touched at all, like, for example, the $250,000 in the natural disaster, that's still there. The 200,000 in insurance contingency, that's still in the bucket. But understand that the way the county looks at these funds, this is all of the funds for the North Shore budget, and it's all lumped into Fire 16 reserve. There's 4.377 million in this reserve. How that's divvied up to these different buckets, that's internal, and that's and so my suggestion was to not cut it up into these different buckets, but to set up a reserve that addresses holistically what our comfort level is in having reserves. And the reason for that is, for example, insurance contingency. Why do we need to have $200,000 dedicated to that? I don't believe that that's necessary anymore, especially with the ILA with Shoreline. The natural disaster at 250,000. I mean, again, these are things that were done in this resolution in 2020. And it superseded something from 2017 because Don found the 2017 resolution too. David was probably part of this. So if we want to keep them and make sure that those buckets are identified there, I'm totally fine with it. I was just trying to make it simpler and more efficient.
I think we may well agree with you, but first I feel like our starting point has to just be, where do we sit relative to what what we said we're going to do in the resolution? Where do we sit relative to that?
Well, these things are the natural disaster is there's 250,000, in what Dawn provided to me as far as, her internal, budget. That's what these were. These numbers here, there's 250,000 in that. There's 200,000 in the insurance contingency. There's
So we're looking at right now, we're looking at the document titled fund balances.
Yeah, but that's not the one that has the.
That's my proposal. This is the old version with the
Mm.
different numbers.
That's the
Okay.
one it'd be nice to get a copy of. If we could.
For the public's benefit, could you read those? Because nobody has access to that document.
Yeah, and
So, well, if we're gonna follow it, then yeah, it's gonna be important. But the, as it stands now, that it's the natural disaster.
I'm sorry, I was gonna suggest we could make some copies of that after you read it.
we could take a 5-minute break while we're getting that done, take a quick intermission. And
Sure.
have a copy and then. That'd help.
Yeah.
Can we do that? 5 minutes?
Sure.
I'll go.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
We're gonna go ahead and resume the recording and continue on with the meeting.
Okay, so the copies that I just provided to you, there's three copies here. The first page is the 2023 budget. This page here, that shows what was budgeted for 2023 for those fund balances. And Dawn, if she's still here, if she can, yeah, she's still on. If we want to ask her any questions after I walk through this, then, you know, she might be a much better, well, she's definitely smarter about this than I am. So these are the fund balances that were budgeted for this year. If you turn the page to the next one, I have an extra copy dated.
Well, the public needs to hear anyway,
So, okay.
And we can post it after.
So the next one is the initial copy that I received from Dawn with the estimates for year to date. You see at the top there, you'll see year to date, September 30th, 2023. She did a great job in identifying what had been coming out of each of these different funds, you know, throughout this year, which then I used to formulate what I was proposing with mine, which isn't attached to this because I didn't want to complicate things any further. The final page I printed out for you is where we sit as of today on the fund balances. And so, for example, the third line down, it says fire 16 reserve, 4.377 million. That includes all of those different reserves. I can't tell you that each one of these is exactly, except I know a couple of them, like natural disaster and insurance contingent. We haven't touched them at all. So I can absolutely tell you that those have $250,000 and $200,000 respectively in them. But as far as the unplanned reserve, you know, loss of revenues, I can't tell you exactly what that is. I can tell you how much there is total. But, you know, from the allocation standpoint of the, you know, that you'd have to pull each one of these out, which I could do, I just haven't. You know, the employee.
So I have a question. So that 2022 fund, the balance on 9/30/2022. Well, that's then.
That was in 2022. I'm showing this to you because this is what was planned for this year. To give you an idea of what was what was starting, you know, in 2023, what we're projecting for end of 2023 balance.
I'm just trying to figure out how we got to the $4.377 million that is fire 16 reserve on page 3 for King County.
And that would reflect, you know, expenses and things that went into it, and that would be here on the second page. If you look at the reserves, that's got the 6.4487 at the bottom is what was budgeted for 2023. But we've also had expenses and so forth that have come out of this. Okay, and so this is this column here, year to date through September 30th of 2023. That's year to date through September 20th of 2023. This is as of November 5th. Right now, so there's a difference there. Some of these things lag with the county catching up with it, so it's
right.
It's not completely accurate. I mean, we have accuracy and we're accurate down to the penny, but I can't tell you exactly because of the lag in some of these things in the report acts. That makes sense. I can tell you that we have 4.377 million as of today, well, as of November 5th. We have 4.377 million in our reserve, our total reserve, which includes insurance contingency, natural disaster, unplanned revenue, or you know, etc. That includes the left one benefits, it includes the retiree, it includes all those things that are on there. And we have 4.377 million in it as of November 5th.
So just to understand the page 1 fund balances document they gave us. So we got, it starts the balance at 4.6 million on 9/30/2022. Then there's annual liabilities, then 2023 transfer. So that would be transfer from our general fund into our reserve fund.
Correct.
Is that correct? That would
I believe, yeah.
That would give us that end of 2023 balance.
Correct, because that was to balance the anticipated expenditures and or revenues that needed to go in to cover, to bring up a level, to whatever. So, like the equipment replacement, a $500,000 transfer in to bring it up to 681,181.
And when our 2 new engines, when did that expense come out? Was that in 2023?
So
Yeah.
So then if you switch the page to 2023 and look down at vehicles, year to date, that second column over through September 30th of 2023, we spent 761,528. So
Chunk of that was.
right, so that's why I can't tell you, there's money going in and there's money coming out, that's fine.
That's why there's no money in there to draw for the rest of it.
It's negative. Another example, if you go down to facilities improvement, the budget is for $100,000 to be in 51 and 57. But we've got, more than that being spent on some of the other stuff that we, had to pull from, in the other at least, and so we're negative 19,000 there. Which if you go to what I had proposed in my budget, that's why we have to transfer money in just to cover the negative that were there, plus whatever we want to have in that fund.
Plus, we're discussing the transfers out.
If you approve what I'm proposing, that's correct.
Yeah, so
It improves the fund balances in these other areas.
so we're looking at the fund balance sheet right now. Is that what we're going into? Right? That's where we talk about transferring funds.
Right.
Well, I guess I just want to know, just before moving to that discussion, so. So. If we. I guess the only other question I had would be, I'm just comparing the resolution to the fund balances. So for apparatus and equipment replacement. So there's the 2 categories of apparatus and equipment replacement and facilities improvement. And the fund level funded at 100% of the recommended amount shown in the capital asset replacement plan for vehicles, apparatus, and equipment. I guess, do we know about that particular dollar amount?
No.
Okay.
Because it's not accurate. First of all, there isn't a good, especially on the apparatus. I forwarded you the North Shore apparatus replacement strategy. It may as well not be existent. It's a spread. It says engines 10 years, rescue 15 years. It doesn't have
A dollar amount.
And the RCL study does not address apparatus. So that is the area that I was talking about earlier, that we have to do a better job of forecasting all those things out, so that when they come due, that there's proper amounts. Plus, there's been significant increases in all the costs of all these things. A fire engine is now $1.3 million. So we have to, that is.
So essentially, we don't have an exact dollar amount to say what that, or number to say what that dollar amount should be.
No.
That specific allocation. We can generally say that we feel like the amount that is actually allocated for that is not adequate, but we need to further study to identify. If we were to budget appropriately for the next 10 years, what do we need to put in for that?
Correct.
Okay,
And that's one of the reasons why in my proposal, I just kind of plucked it out of the sky at this point and said $900,000. We need $900,000 in that fund as a minimum,
okay, and then,
you know, and now we can play with that number as to what the comfort level is, but as we are deferring the rescue, that 900,000 is not adequate. And, you know, I'm proposing that we put 600,000 more and make it 1.5 million, you know, as a minimum, you know, for next year, knowing that we got to still come up with another 500,000 plus, you know, by the next year to fund the rest, and that's just to fund the rescue. That has no other apparatus costs in there.
I got a stupid question in one respect. An engine is 1.3 and a rescue is 2 million. Tell me,
That's one of the reasons that I'm
what sense does that make?
that's one of the reasons why I was floored and I had expletives when the chief told me, you know, what the cost was, because I was like, how can it's a bigger apparatus, it's a heavier apparatus, that's, you know, it's that's the only thing I can tell you, because you have a very good point of like, it doesn't have a pump. You know, but it does have it has a generator, it has lighting packages, it has some of these other things. And unfortunately, that's the cost. It is one of the things that you also pay for, is because it's not a apparatus that gets made a lot. You pay for more for it because it's more of a one-off as opposed to, you know, something that they're producing, you know, 300 of a year,
Right.
You know, or 1,000 or whatever, I don't know, whatever they're producing. Our plan is to try and piggyback on with different specs, such as maybe Seattle's or somebody else's, so that we can maybe get some efficiencies there. But until we spec it out, we're not going to be able to know.
the other question I have, just with regard to the reserves specified in our resolution, is the 100 facilities improvement. And it says funded at 100% of the recommended annual contributions shown in the facility reserve.
Yeah.
Right, so we do have a number on that, right? From the
It's
study.
absolutely not accurate. Absolutely not even close to accurate.
Okay, so we have a number, but it's not accurate.
Yeah.
It was accurate when they wrote
It
it.
wasn't even accurate. I would argue it wasn't. It's a great report.
Mhm.
It looks really good, but when you get into the details, it's hollow. It is.
So
it's
right
not
at,
even
so
close.
right at the moment, we don't really have
No,
good exact numbers for what we need to have in those accounts
No.
for those purposes. Okay.
um, I started looking at the numbers and I'm like, you know, like, for example, you know, what are they budgeting for a generator replacement? $8,000.
What?
$8,000.
In that RC.
Yes. An $8,000 will get you maybe one for your residential home, you know, a good one for your
Maybe.
residential home without any labor or anything. like
Yeah,
that. It will not get you a 50 kW commercial and wired and labored and all that.
Even a Honda 7 kW is about.
It's about 5, I think, or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So $8,000, are you kidding me? You know, so.
Okay.
I guess just my original thought was we're to check, you know, where are we relative to the areas that are specified in the resolution, but I think it sounds like it's not possible to accurately say where we are.
I can tell you the overall numbers, but you're absolutely right. And maybe the safest way is just to not mess with it. You know, but that means that the equivalent levy rate is gonna go up. You know, it'll go up more than what we could if we were to be a little, what I would say, aggressive with the reallocation of reserves.
Well, I mean, I think we should look at what do we, I think at this point, we don't have an accurate forecast of what these particular future reserves need to be, apparatus and equipment replacement, facilities improvement. But we have some information you've gathered about some things that we can anticipate coming up, some major things. So I think we could at least come up with what we feel is an appropriate amount to have in there. In addition to our other reserves.
So what I was proposing was like, putting, certain amounts in just to keep at least some funding levels in there while we dive into this deeper. and come out with the 20-year plan that I was discussing and that I forwarded, to you, and I'll forward it to all of you. I have a 20-year apparatus plan, equipment plan, facilities plan for Shoreline. I started developing a 20-year equipment plan for North Shore last year and got some headway on it, but it wasn't completely updated and complete, and it didn't have apparatus in it. And I did that because for the ILA, where I need to budget for those equipment replacement plans above and beyond what's included in the ILA, but so like future equipment replacements like chainsaws, that is not on the North Shore, that's not on the North Shore, that's on Shoreline's equipment replacement budget. And that is money that there was a little bit of a transfer, not. The other challenge is that the inflation rate, as I mentioned before, has gone up way, way, way higher than what the 3.5% that is allocated. So Shoreline is especially as we move into the future, we'll be taking the brunt of the equipment replacement above and beyond the percentage that is probably appropriate, but that is what the contract says, and that's what we'll have to follow. So but that is the challenge that we have, that we, and that we knew that the inflation rate may not be, appropriate, and it's not up for reevaluation, I think, until 2025 or 6. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's in the contract. And we will adhere to that because that's what the contract is, but just understand that those are costs that North Shore won't have to pay, the appropriate level of percentage of. So on the fund balances, how do you guys do you want me to try and draw down money out of the expense fund and the reserve fund to help fund the capital projects and purchases that were identified for 2024? Or do you want to not transfer money out of there? Not transferring money out of those funds will drive up the equipment levy rate significantly.
Can you reiterate that about because part of it is transferring it from the reserves. Is part of it that we have some overage in the general fund as well?
Yes, we are carrying extra funds in the expense in the general fund. That in my opinion, we do not need, because it is above that formula that I showed you, as far as the 25%, plus 700,000. So we are carrying extra money above that can be reallocated to soften the equivalent levy rate increase that's going to be necessary to fund the things that we've identified.
Chief, I think it makes sense to draw down the general expense fund, right? Going into the reserve funds, if we do that now, it helps us this fiscal year, right? It helps us in 2024, but we're all acknowledging that our reserves are way underfunded. And so we're going to have to, at some point, replenish those. So whether or not we do it right now, or we do it, in 2025, it's like, we can buy ourselves a year and hope that the AV goes up significantly, right? But the bill is going to come due, and we're going to have to fund our reserves appropriately. So I don't know if it makes sense to draw down right now to keep that AV low, or to keep that equivalent rate low. Or if it's just like, let's just take our pill right now and move forward. I'm torn a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great point. We are going over this hump right now, and this hump is not 1 year. It's going to be a 2 or 3 year hump that we're going over. But once we catch up, then we will be in a much better place to be metered out and planning for the future. But we have to it's painful. It's going to be painful over these next 2 or 3 years. So you have a point of like, do we want to help Peter to pay Paul? I mean, are we, how far? And if we do pull down, maybe we shouldn't pull down as much as what I'm proposing. or maybe none at all and leave it in the reserve. It's kind of hard to say because we've been all over the board, pun intended, I suppose, tonight with the budget.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you what the equivalent levy rate is without doing some work. We could take another break and I could try and do some magic and get that done, or I can send it to you via email. You can tell me that that's too high or not enough, but we have to be very careful about we can't do a meeting. We'd have to reply directly to me, or we have another special meeting before in a week, before I have to have all the resolutions done. The resolutions, we need to have those done by the 21st because we have to get them to the county by the 30th. So I feel like we've made a lot of progress tonight of where I think you guys want to be. What I can't tell you is what that equivalent levy rate is going to be without doing some more work.
I think we need to have another special meeting next week. There's just so much.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I think it seems like we've kind of established what we feel like we need to spend money on right now for the budget, for the capital budget. We just, right now, we are figuring out, okay, where we're gonna take that money from, how much are we gonna take from
I need to
general
dig
expense,
into it a little bit.
reserve, and
So
fire benefit charge.
I can, what I can do is I can take the stuff that we've got. I can work up a couple of different scenarios. And send you, like I did send you a couple of different versions of the budget. And say, this is what it looks like this way. I will still make my proposed budget to you. And then that'll give you guys potentially some options to give me some feedback, and to prepare. It may be, I would maybe respectfully suggest, I may make a proposal to you guys and it may be totally fine. And this is exactly where I think we need to be. This is, where the reserves are gonna be, where the expenses, the equivalent levy rate and all that. And if you give me the feedback and say, yeah, I think we're close enough individually, cannot tell me, you cannot collaborate on this. Individually, if you tell me that that's good, then I can tell you that we are, close enough or good enough to go to develop the resolutions for, and we can kick the meeting, not do a special meeting in a week and go a couple weeks out. Or we could have the special meeting and it could be a pretty quick one.
I think that we should have.
The special meeting.
Special meeting.
Yeah.
Next
That's fine.
Tuesday at 5.
That's the better way to go. It's the safer way to
Well,
go.
the public's just getting these,
Yeah,
and I've had some of it, but some of this is new to me today. I beat time, and I think it's very important that we allow the public to see it too. Good catch.
Thank you.
All right.
So it's me with my pillow.
All right.
yeah, I definitely want the public to have time to kind of digest it and ask questions and
So
go from there.
one of the things that we run into is what we post needs to be accurate.
Mhm.
And it needs to be reflective of so what I could do is, and we can do this as a work in progress too, of I make the changes, I get a proposed budget, I send it to you all, you think it's close enough and we post it and start getting feedback. We can continue to refine it and then have that special meeting and then, finalize whatever it is. That gives us, it has to be done at that next meeting, because I cannot have my staff, scrambling with less than a day or two to make sure that all the resolutions, because those have to be perfectly, identified.
Right.
So I told them that I was gonna give them at least a week, so if we do a meeting a week from today. Have to finalize it at that meeting.
I think that would be doable. We just need it.
Okay.
We need time to crunch the numbers.
I will get you guys, these changes tomorrow. And you can start, digesting or ask me questions. If there's things that you're like, well, what if we did this, or what if we do that, or if we drop the reserves of this, or how much money can we really, take from the general fund, and all that. And I can work with Dawn too, because, the numbers we got back, I just got these today. But I think I'm not gonna be able to answer exactly, what these things are. I can give you a fairly good close estimate on where we're at, but
In the next week or two, but I would hope that, next year's budget process will have a better. Sense on those accurate numbers.
yeah, and and that's also why I was proposing the simplified version of the reserves, because then I can just do I can just say, We need $3 million in our reserves. And I can tell you what it is on such and such date and what our projection is for the end of the year. And I can just, is it 3 million? Is it 3.5 or is it 1.8? You know, whatever it is, that instead of, you know, cutting it up into these different buckets. Again, if you guys want it that way, that's totally fine.
Well, that's how we
Just-
track, the buckets tell us where we're at and which.
But some of these buckets I don't think are germane anymore.
Well, that's,
like
that-
we should
that's a
have
good
the-
discussion we can have.
We should have a future agenda item,
That's-
that's
yeah.
discussion of reserve funds and the resolution and just whether we wanna.
For
modify
next
that,
year,
but
we
that-
need to
Amy,
deal
did you
with it.
get that? Thank you.
So,
Okay,
Okay,
But I do have a question. So for the meeting on the 14th, next Tuesday, what is the purpose of that meeting? Because with a special meeting, the agenda items have to be set. You can't change them after. And
It
all
would be-
materials have to be posted 24 hours ahead of time.
I think it would be a continuation of the hearing,
public hearing.
public hearing,
Okay.
yeah, on the budget and the levy and benefit charge.
Yeah, with the same items on it.
Okay. So
and I would say
this is
only that,
public.
Yes.
and it will only be that item on the
Okay.
agenda.
Thank
So
you.
we're all in agreement to table the resolution until sometime in December.
No.
The,
He's talking about the reserves resolution.
yes.
That can be done
Next year.
anytime.
Okay, yes.
Unless it's. Well, no, unless the proposed budget that we adopt. Doesn't have at least the minimum amount of reserves. It doesn't matter internally how we cut it up into different buckets. As long as we have at least whatever that total amount is, which we will. So,
I think bottom line, we have a adequate amount of money in reserves. It would just be,
oh yeah, we have.
it would be nice to be able to accurately have our, if we're gonna stick with these same buckets, calculated with the dollar amount. should be.
Right. Which I can try and do a better job of and cut them up into those different buckets. I can do that and I can put it back, I can. Throw out what I did with my fund balances and I can put the old fund balance or buckets back in there. And put, you know, what we have. But, you know, like 250, 200 and whatever's left will be the capital, you know, or something. I can do something like that, you know, and put it in a similar format to what we've done in the past. Again, I was trying to make it easier. Clearly, I failed. So I was trying to make it simpler, more efficient and easier, you know, to identify what those things are. So,
okay, so if everyone's done with discussion, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to any public comments.
Yeah.
And I know Mr. Marin had one, so you've got 3 minutes to speak, Mr. Marin.
Well, first of all, I would ask if I could have more than 3 minutes. I know that's a typical thing, but this is, as you just witnessed in the last 2 hours, it's a fairly complicated topic. I would think I would need maybe 8, perhaps 10 minutes to go over my materials, and if you have questions that would be.
That, how do you guys feel about that? That seems like a long time, but
I think it's appropriate with what we just went over.
well, that means we have to give everyone that
Yeah.
wishes that long, but
For on this subject, it's too big of a subject to be
okay, why don't you go ahead and start?
Thank you, I appreciate that. And you want to take notes, I'll provide a copy to each person here. And then, there's a couple of decisions I made during listening to your discussion, and so I will provide them to the board secretary, so you can just listen and not have to worry about the other numbers. I believe you all know me. I served as the North Shore Fire District Commissioner for 20 years. During that time, I learned a great deal about fire district budgets. I have nearly every time I've spoken to this board, I remind you that it's your responsibility as fire commissioners to represent the best interests of the district residents and their department. They voted to create the fire district, they provide the funding for the department. When NFD contracted with the Shoreline Fire Department, NFD was the most well-funded fire department in our region. Reserves are 100% goal, apparatus were new or about to be replaced. Facilities were in excellent condition, and the facility maintenance reserves were set according to the professional facility reserve consultant study. If you approve this budget, you will undo decades of responsible fiscal management. The board and the fire chief must differentiate between wants and needs. The board must differentiate between shoreline fire funding responsibilities, regional funding responsibilities, i.e. the training consortium, and the North Shore Fire District funding responsibility. This budget does not do that. As I'll describe later, the Woodinville Fire Department and Eastside Fire and Rescue have balanced needs versus wants, serve the best interest of the citizen, and provide top-notch fire services. Their 2024 proposed budget actually reduces tax collections by 1.9%, even though their AD went down 14%, greater than yours. About the NSFD proposed budget, and you've had some discussions that might change what I've written here, but in essence, the total proposed fire district services contract payments, including capital and other costs from the North Shore Fire District to the Shoreline Fire Department, will increase by 64%. The North Shore Fire District 2023 budget was $10,739,734. The proposed budget for 2024 is $17,630,649. 2, the taxpayer rate will increase from 86 cents per thousand assessed valuation in 2023 to $1.25 per 1,000 of AD in 2024. This is a 52% tax increase and a tax dollar increase of 32% in 1 year. 3, the operations service rate is increased by 15.36%, $10,489,625 in 2023 to $12,101,180 in 2024. The firefighter cost of living increase for 2024 is set at 4.6%. This drives about 80% of the fire department budget. Why are North Shore Fire Department operation costs increasing 10.7%, more than the cost of living for the firefighters? 5, $1,050,000 is proposed to be transferred from the North Shore Fire Department unplanned loss of revenue account. This sleight of hand budgeting arbitrarily reduces the goal amount to free up funds, is risky. It deprives the North Shore Fire Department of a well-reasoned reserve dollars, costs NFD about $60,000 in lost incident rate each year. Be real, do not extract the money from this reserve account, but perhaps move it to the funds that are not completely funded. And as you talked about, there's, the cost of a generator is $8,000, but you have that with that $1 million, you can rectify a lot of the issues in the other funds. That also reduces the need for you to budget more money in a general account from general reserves, because you have it in the reserve account to pay. That's how we bought all of our apparatus. And regarding the apparatus fund, it was always the intent of the apparatus fund, as is with the other reserve accounts, that those numbers would be revisited annually so that we wouldn't get too far behind an inflation spike. 6, during difficult times like today, when the AV is reduced by 9%, it's difficult to understand why the board is considering adding new positions. The service demands in the North Shore Fire District area have not changed. The fire service contract requires that the Shoreline Fire Department reduce battalion chief positions before by June of 2023. I see no justification for a new HR position, social media position, additional administrative positions. The chief quoted $440,000 for the BC position. I can only guess the cost of the other position is likely in the $700,000 range total. The North Shore Fire Department share of that cost is $250,000. Because of the high expenditure proposed in the 2024 budget and the large expenditures deferred till 2025, the benefit charge is nearly maxed out. Well, actually, there's plenty of capacity in the benefit charge. You're simply spending too much money. The fire chief is recommending a levy lid lift election in 2024. This means even higher expenditures in 2025 and higher taxes for many years to come. The North Shore Fire Department appears to be subsidizing the Shoreline Fire Department and the training consortium. That is not the North Shore Fire Department's responsibility. And I can guarantee you that if you try a levy next year, you will have opposition. And that's something that fire department does not want to see when they try to raise a levy limit. Berkshire Fire Department is proposing a levy collection of $5,908,457 and a benefit charge collection of $9,610,000. State law limits the benefit charge collection to 60% of operating budget for the year in which the benefit charge is collected. The operating budget does not include capital expenditures. It appears the North Shore Fire Department is requesting $2,206,047 more than the allowable benefit charge amount. And there's calculations I have in here that you'll get when you get the paper. Tax and cost comparisons. The Woodville Fire Department contracts with Eastside Fire for the same suite of fire services as the North Shore Fire Department. Woodville Fire Department's tax rate is slated to increase from 81 cents per thousand of AB in 2023 to 92 cents per thousand in 2024. This is because the assessed valuation of the district fell by 14%. The tax collections will actually decline by 1.9% in 24 in Woodville. North Shore Fire Department's contract with the Shoreline Fire Department Fire Services. The North Shore Fire Department rate is slated to increase from 86 cents per thousand of AB in 2023 to $1.25 per thousand. The North Shore Fire Department tax collections will increase by 64% in 2024. The North Shore Fire Department assessed value decreased by 9%, not 14 of Woodinville. The North Shore cost to provide fire service will be 42% more than in the Woodinville Fire Department. Some questions for the board members. It's difficult to analyze the proposed budget for the contract with the Shoreline Fire Department because there's no underlying budget information available. Revenue information is incomplete, and there are a few questions that I believe you should ask. Another issue is that the numbers keep changing, and I know that's the chief's greatest nightmare. First, do you know why the North Shore Fire Department operations service rate increase is 15% when the shoreline increase for the operations service rate is just 8.65%? I would think they would be the same. You know why the North Shore Fire Department is paying for a new shelving system for Rescue 51 when the shelter model is accommodating equipment provided by Sound Transit? The Shoreline Fire Department has a contract with Sound Transit. Shouldn't the Rescue 51 remodel be paid for with the Sound Transit contract funds? There are no Sound Transit facilities within the North Shore Fire District. Do you know why the Shoreline Fire Department is requesting $112,000 for MIH program costs? The funds supporting that program have typically been passed through dollars from the Medicare levy. The Shoreline Fire Department receives NSFD's share of the Medicare levy. I don't know how Shoreline spends that money, but there should be no cost to you. I would also add the question of why in such tough times are we adding an MIH person to that unit when costs are a real concern. I don't see any justification in the calls for service or demand for those units. You could also combine your MIH program with the city's radar program, which does exactly the same thing as yours does, and save both the cities and yourself money. Do you know why the Shoreline Fire Department is requesting $126,689 for retirement payouts? The contract signed in June of 2022 gave the Shoreline Fire Department $1,246,324 from the North Shore Employee Benefit Fund to cover future vacation and sick leave cash outs or payments for people transferring out, for the people that transferred out of NFD into Shoreline. Had North Shore Fire Department retained this money, like you did with the Left One Fund, the interest alone earned on that money would have been $60,000 this past year, paying for half of the cost that the chief is asking for. Number 5, do you know why North Shore Fire Department is being asked to provide and pay for new buildings for the training consortium? All the training costs identified in the loaded employee rate that we contract for with Shoreline Fire Department. Section 7.1 of the contract provides for the use of Station 51 and 57 by Shoreline Fire Department. It does not provide for use of Station 51 by the training consortium. Any construction should come with 1, a contract with the training consortium for the use of Station 51. 2, a plan and contract that reimburses North Shore Fire Department for all expenses associated with the project, including permitting, architecture, engineering, utility fees, construction, furniture and equipment, carried interest costs, and the lease of the land used to build the facility. And that contract should be completed in advance of the building. If I sell a house, I don't agree to pay what you can when you can. You need a solid guarantee that you're gonna get that money back. And unless you have a contract with a training consortium agree to reimburse you, I guarantee you won't get your money back. 6, do you know that section 7.6 of the North Shore Fire Department, Shoreline Fire Department contract signed in June of 22 stated that no major capital improvements to the stations is anticipated during the Shoreline Fire Department. Shoreline Fire Department accepts the facilities as is conditions. The North Shore Fire Department follows the professional assessment reserve consultant to create a pay schedule for capital improvements. I believe the schedule should be followed. And if their numbers aren't correct, when the study was provided, they specifically asked for comments about that study prior to the publishing.
And we're at 12 minutes, Mr. Marin. Are you about ready to wrap up?
I am at one more page to go after this.
Okay.
Chief Cowan budget comments state that 12 new firefighters are being hired. The North Shore Fire Department staffing levels for Station 51 and 57 will remain the same. Additional staffing is not needed at NSFD stations. Anything the new firefighters will reduce the average cost per firefighter and reduce the charges to North Shore Fire Department. We should not share on the cost of those 12 firefighters. Do you know why the revenue budget only identifies revenue from interest levy and benefit charge from GEO bond and interest earned? No revenue or offset credit is shown in the 24 budget for 1, the medic $1 we received, 2, patient transportation. NFB should receive revenue or an identified credit for patient transport collections. GEMT, the contract says we will participate in GMT revenue. NFD should receive revenue and identified credit for the GMT funds received. Transfer of reserve funds to SFD in advance of payment to apprise NFD of interest earned for these funds. Any interest earned while NFD funds are held by SFD should be returned to North Shore Fire Department or credited to NFD. The 2.46 million in employee benefit funds should be returned to the North Shore Fire Department by SFD and used to reimburse the Shoreline Fire Department for employee retirement cash out costs, just as NFD does for left one retirees. The return of these funds will bring SFD and SFD back in compliance with RCW 4369-210, which doesn't allow a agency to profit from a contract. Training consortium payments, Chief Cowan has stated, is collecting additional funds from training consortium for the use of Station 51. These funds should be provided to NFD. Any future contract with the training coalition should identify revenue dedicated to NFD. And note the rescue truck. I believe that the North Shore Fire Department should get out of the business of having a rescue truck and allow Shoreline to buy the rescue truck and use the mitigation dollars they receive from building and Shoreline and pay for that. The North Shore Board's obligation is to represent the best interest of the citizens of the district. I realize that 4 of the 5 board members either have a conflict of interest or implicit bias in favor of the fire service. That doesn't mean you can't overcome this. Eric Gadman is a fire medic employee of the contract provider SFD. Josh Pratt is a firefighter employee of the Kirkland Fire Department. That department's a member of the training coalition. Lisa Wollam is a wife of a recently retired Shoreline Fire Department Division Chief. Tyler Byers is an International Associate Firefighter member and employee of the Lacey Fire District 3. I implore you to set aside your personal bias you may have and work in the best interest of the district citizens. Conclusion. I strongly suggest that you set a tax rate limit, then set expenses not to exceed that tax rate. Services should not cost more than 90 to 95 cents per thousand AD. Woodville Fire contracts for the same services with just 92 cents per
Mr. Marin, we're gonna have to have you wrap up.
this much to go. The proposed budget has NFD paying 40% more than Woodville. I know time is short. I urge you to revisit this proposed 2024 budget and rein in the want expenses and stick to the need expenses. Comply with state law and reduce the fire benefit charge to 60% or less of the operations budget. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate the extra minutes to do that.
Is there anyone else that had any public comment? I've got a hand raised, Stacy Valenzuela, it looks like, and Paul Hess would be next, Amy. Stacy, if you want to go ahead and speak.
Yes, sorry. Yes, good evening, Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. First, thank you for allowing time for the public to review these proposed budgets numbers. I actually agree with some of Dave Moran's points, but I think that also with it being a voting night, the city of Kenmore and Lake Forest Park, some of the city council members should be included, I believe, as well as more of the city. We need clearly marked needs, wants, and things that can be put off on this budget as well. And I also thought we were promised with the service contract that there would not be a huge increase. Yet because of more captains, chiefs, and admins are added, now there's a levy coming up. I think, where's the funding from Lake Forest Park? I don't see that listed at all. Also, I don't see the consortium portion on the budget and a promissory note of the payback, because that's important. And it should be listed on the budget, and it should clearly be listed that this is the amount owed and this is the expected amount. And as it's contributed back, it would be a credit showing that that's been paid back on the budget. I also had suggested that there are grants for capital needs, and I even submitted the number. Has anybody even looked into that? How long was the water leaking on the property at Station 54? And had the bill been continually that high for the long term and nobody noticed? Good thing somebody went out there to start surveying. Also, about the tenant at the warehouse. Are they still occupying that space, and are they still leaving at the end of December? Those are other things that I think clearly needs to be looked into. I also found that this meeting was extremely confusing to follow along with. When the pages were shifted, they were either going too fast or stuck in one spot to where nobody in the public could actually follow along. I hope that you take into consideration many of these concerns that have been brought forward, because it does matter. A lot of people with inflation and coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot of money at the state and federal level that can help with some of these capital things, and punishing the public to make all these changes is not the easiest and the most comfortable way to go at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hess?
My name is Paul Hess. I live in Kenmore for the last 18 and a half years. I basically have a very short presentation and 3 things to say. You're raising taxes way too much, 32%. I pay $31,000 a year in property tax, $31,000 a year. I have rentals, and every time you raise taxes, I just pass it on to those poor renters. You need to control the budget. You need to be more transparent, and you're spending too much money. You promised us that if you got this consolidation, this consortium with Shoreline, that you wouldn't have a significant tax increase. Now you're doing it, and that's a huge disappointment, and is very hard for the public to understand when you promise something and now you're not keeping it. Woodinville's levy is actually being reduced by almost 2%. And the dollar amount that we're paying for the North Shore Fire District is slated under this proposal to go up 32%. The last thing I would say, and I know it's a hard thing to say, but the optics of this board are poor. When you have 4 out of 5 members that have ties to fire districts, whatever you do, whatever you say, whatever you promise looks like a conflict of interest, even though I will accept that you are all honorable people. But human nature is human nature, and it feels like you're protecting your own rather than protecting the wallet of the taxpayer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that had public comment? I don't see any other hands up.
Nope. If you did.
Okay. We're gonna move on to board discussion and review of the budget proposal.
Oh, no, I think we need to formally
Which-
continue the public hearing and then move on.
I'm sorry, say that again, Eric.
We need to formally continue the public hearing to our special meeting.
To the special meeting.
Oh, got you. Okay, so we're for the next week, you mean?
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about? Okay, so we're gonna continue the public hearing until next week on the 14th. We will now move on to board discussion and possible action items. Subcommittee report on Station 54.
We've already discussed that with the water issues and stuff. We have two consultants, I believe, looking into it. So that'll be ongoing.
Okay,
One clarification I'd just say is that the water leak was detected within 24 hours and that's when it was shut off.
oh, that's great to know.
So
Thank you. Subcommittee report on Station 51 outbuilding.
we've discussed it to some degree. I think that do you have anything more to add? That it looks like we're actually potentially going to get a third bid. We've been struggling for weeks, months to get a third quote. Anything
So
more to add?
the third company came back and said that they had been busy with some training and some other things. Their hope is to get that third bid to us, so.
Okay.
It's priority to get you those proposals and lay it out, so it's clear.
Our plan would be to do that on the meeting at the 21st.
Then 2024 FBC letter to taxpayers.
So I gave you a draft letters to review and provide any feedback. We have to adopt this tonight. We have to, whatever letter it is. They're waiting for us literally. After the meeting, I need to send this to the printers. Was there any concerns or questions about the letter itself? Doesn't have specific numbers in for the fire benefit charge or anything like that, so it's not contingent on what we do, moving forward with the budget. But I did put in the letter that the equivalent levy rate would be increasing. I don't know how much.
I didn't have a problem with either one of them. Consensus is there.
Right, great, thank you.
Okay. No board resolution consent agenda.
I make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. The motion passes unanimously. Let's see, fire chief's report.
Any questions?
Mm-mm.
Long one.
I think I did have a couple of questions. Oh, yeah, I had a question. What's going on with NEMCO and that is dropping out on NEMCO?
So, yes, so NUD has formally withdrawn from NEMCO. And at the end of this year. They've reconciled the amount because they did not give proper notice. They're going to be pulling for what they would be what their allocation of reserves are to balance the financial impact of what they would have to contribute. But we'll be formally out at the end of this year. There is some active conversations going on with the city of Shoreline. And other cities, I believe, in doing a partnership or either Nemco, City of Shoreline joining Nemco, or Nemco being part of Shoreline, or so I don't know what those conversations are going on, but that involves Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, City of Shoreline, and Kevin Lowry, as those discussions go on. I've been getting little updates here and there of it, but I've been just saying, from our perspective, it would be great for all entities to be together, because then I have consistency of operations and, expectations of, like, for example, if we had an earthquake, the expectation right now is that there'd be an EOC here. But my staff is all up at 61, the EOC is gonna be there, so how do we balance that? So having everybody together would really help from a consistency standpoint for planning. And delivery of training and so forth.
So I guess my question is, who are all the partners right now? And then was there a particular driver that, just decided they were?
Yeah, so the remaining partners are the City of Lake Forest Park, City of Kenmore, and the North Shore Fire Department. And NUD exited, I believe. I don't want to speak too much for them, but I will say that what they stated in the meeting was that they didn't feel like they were getting quite as much representation as they would liked or wanted, and that they've had a change in leadership over at NUD, and so that affected what their needs were and so forth, and potentially what the priorities were with the previous leadership as opposed to now, or compared to now, and that they've gotten what they need out of NUD and are going to take that on internally, the other services that were being provided as far as like training and so forth, that they were going to take that on themselves.
Okay,
Is that it, Eric?
yeah, I think those are my questions. Chief Clerk.
Okay, and are there any other commissioner reports? We kind of already hit them. Legal counsel report.
Nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. And Amy, the next meeting's agenda.
Yes. So there will be a special meeting on next Tuesday, November 14th at 5 p.m. And that will be a continuation of the public hearing on the budget and fire benefit charge. There will be a special meeting on November 21st at 5 p.m. And that will be to pass the board resolution related to the fire benefit charge and the 2024 budget. There may also be a line item with the bids with an outbuilding. Is that correct?
Yes.
That meeting, okay. So with special meetings, once the agenda is set 24 hours before, it can't be modified. And then there'll be the regular meeting December 5th. We can talk.
Perfect. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and say meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Son, for being here and being available. Appreciate it. Talk about